In the third year of marriage, Fuseo was exposed to have kept a canary in the entertainment industry. She was his ex-girlfriend who had accompanied him through hardships. In a dim and cramped room, he learned to arrange flowers in beverage bottles to make her happy. Netizens were crazy about their story and flooded into his Weibo to express their pity. However, no one knew how I had accompanied him through those tearful nights. After I proposed divorce, Fuseo walked 30 kilometers on foot to look for me. Hearing this, I just smiled faintly and said, "You're quite a walker. You're suitable for marathons." A friend sent me a screenshot with a message attached. Vivian's team is riding on this wave of popularity. Won't Fuseo deal with it? I clicked on the screenshot, and the top trending topic was, #loving someone is like cultivating a flower, Vivian #. Vivian had been mediocre for many years. Recently, she became famous overnight for playing the role of a beautiful yet bad femme fatale in a TV series. With her sudden popularity, some netizens dug into her background. Since her debut, she had been getting top-notch resources. She was so capricious that she could play roles that even first-line actresses couldn't obtain. No matter how badly her dramas flopped, she wasn't affected at all. The netizens, whose nerves were touched, dug deeper and deeper. Although they didn't dig out any scandal about her being kept by someone, they unearthed a love story that made people obsessed. Vivian's smooth-sailing career all depended on Fuseo. Fuseo, the heir of the Fuseo family group, was my husband who had been my childhood sweetheart. On my mobile phone screen, a video was playing on loop. The younger Vivian leaned closer to the camera, her eyebrows and eyes stretched out, with a slightly shy smile, like a green plum. She was dressed simply, but still couldn't hide her charm. Fuseo slightly lowered his head and dropped a kiss on the corner of her lips. Her eyes then curved into crescent moons with a smile. She looked so pure and beautiful. Even without a filter, one could tell that this video was from quite a few years ago. This was Fuseo's little-known social media account dug out by netizens. He posted this video 7 years ago today. 7 years ago, Fuseo wasn't by my side. He was made miserable by his stepmother and the illegitimate children in the family. He left his hometown and went abroad alone. 4 years ago, Fuseo returned to China, and this account had never been updated since then. Then he came back to me, said that he loved me, and I begged my brother to help him seize power. The experience that he had never mentioned before turned out not to be because of the pain but because of regret. I spent the whole afternoon going through that account. Just like the plots in all those cheesy novels, Fuseo, who was at a low point in life, met his true love, Vivian, who was willing to endure poverty and accompany him. The two of them had a wonderful time together, and then for some reason, they broke up and Fuseo returned to China. Netizens made this story even more touching. In their story, Fuseo didn't go abroad to take refuge because he was forced to, but because he was young and impulsive, and he went far away for his true love. The two supported each other and fought against life. But in the end, Fuseo didn't win. He was forced by the Fuseo family to return to China and marry me. Vivian swore to stand at the top of the world so that Fuseo could see her, and that's why she entered the entertainment industry. Thus, her previous arrogance and willfulness somehow became cute. After all, she was just a young girl who was head over heels in love. What about me? I was the heinous female supporting role in the story, the obstacle standing in the way of true love. Although I had known him earlier than Vivian, although Fuseo had once vowed that he would only love me in this lifetime, I sat there for a long time. In that account, Fuseo wrote about Vivian. I told her she was so beautiful today, and she got angry because I didn't notice that she didn't wear makeup today. Actually, I did notice, but I really thought she was beautiful, beautiful every day. Surprised. Vivian can make sweet soup now, and it tastes good. I must post a Weibo to praise her. She looks so cute when she's asleep. The attached picture showed Vivian huddled up, with her head resting on his shoulder. The background of the photo was really simple. On a wooden table with some paint peeling off, there was an empty beverage bottle filled with water and a rose inserted in it. It was like the only bright spot on the barren land. When he was down and out and couldn't see any future at all, someone was willing to offer him her whole heart. How could it not be unforgettable? At that time, he wasn't the heir of the Fuseo family group, and she wasn't the controversial actress. They were just a young couple who truly loved each other. Netizens were deeply touched, and countless fan-made videos and fan arts emerged, pushing the popularity to a new level. It seemed that I had become a complete backdrop in this frenzy of shipping them. No one believed that Fuseo and I got together because of love. But I had to admit that in those fragmented words and scattered records, Fuseo had truly loved Vivian. I also had to admit that he didn't love me, or rather, his love for me was just superficial. I had never been loved by him like that. Netizens' imagination went to extremes. The comment section was full of people feeling sorry for their unfulfilled love. If it weren't for the business marriage, the one standing beside you should have been our Vivian. Loving someone is like cultivating a flower. You've cultivated Vivian very well. Why couldn't you marry her? If you marry her, you have to give up your family property. Without the property, you can't protect her well. To protect her, you can only accept the family marriage. People in love can't be together. This is the hardship of the world. Anything that had a touch of romantic elements could quickly ferment and stir the emotions of countless netizens. I came across a relatively rational comment, but he's married. How do you think his wife would feel about what you're doing? This comment was quickly drowned out. Lady, it's a business marriage. Are your eyes just for decoration? His wife isn't worried, but you are. What are you jealous of? The person who posted the comment retorted, don't call me lady right away. Don't smear me. I don't know if his wife is worried or not, but I think you're quite worried. But this comment was quickly swallowed up. 2 minutes later, the person deleted the comment. At a glance, the comment section had completely become a carnival place for Fuseo and Vivian's CP fans. I wasn't that magnanimous, so I sent these screenshots to Fuseo. Half an hour later, Fuseo replied to me, netizens believe rumors easily. There's nothing to it. As if afraid that I would be unhappy, he added, Sophia, don't overthink it. I pinched the flesh on my thigh that had lost all feeling, my fingertips turning white from the force. When I was very young, the doctor said that I would have to rely on a wheelchair for the rest of my life. I didn't like to talk much and wasn't very fond of people. I hated pitying looks and those fake greetings. Only Fuseo was different. He said that this little sister was so strong. He and my brother secretly took me out to play without telling our family. My brother was beaten half to death. Fuseo secretly came to see me, knelt down in front of me, crying and said, Sister, I'm sorry. I didn't know that it would put you in danger. But as long as I acted coquettishly, he would dare to do it again next time. He and my brother took me to watch car races, play basketball, and carried me to climb mountains. My brother held me, and he carried the wheelchair like a fool. When I asked him if he was tired, he showed a row of white teeth with a smile and asked me instead, Sister, are you happy? Because of him, I had many different experiences. I lived like a normal person. I kind of liked this gentle big brother. I told my brother to leave Fuseo for me. My brother didn't hesitate and said yes. Many years later, I begged my brother to help him. And my brother really did it. But Fuseo didn't. My fingertips dug into my palm, and I threw the cup beside me out forcefully. The fragments splashed everywhere. They just landed at the feet of the person who came in. Fuseo froze on the spot and slowly said, Sophia? I bit my lip, feeling a bit at a loss. He took my tightly clenched hand, and Fuseo frowned, Why is your hand so cold? Sophia had never been a brave person. When I liked someone, I would silently make a wish on my mobile phone screen, wishing that he would take the initiative to send me a message. When I liked someone, I would try hard to collect everything related to him and secretly pay attention to him like a shadow. I liked Fuseo, and I couldn't lie to myself. Fuseo didn't like me, and I couldn't deceive myself either. I pried his fingers open one by one. I heard my voice trembling, but I still held back my tears and said softly, Fuseo, let's get a divorce. Fuseo was stunned for a moment, and then he squatted down in a panic, looking at me at eye level. There was undisguised anxiety in his eyes, and he asked repeatedly, "What's going on? Did I do something wrong?" I pursed my lips and didn't answer. Almost instantly, Fuseo understood. "Are you really that bothered by it? She and I are already in the past." In front of me, Fuseo made a phone call. I heard him instruct the person on the other end to take down the trending topic. "Sophia, don't be unhappy. She's in the rising period of her career. Anyway, I had a relationship with her before. I won't be too harsh." He sounded sincere, with every word expressing his loyalty. I looked at his face and suddenly thought of an afternoon many years ago. It was probably a Friday. The flowers in the yard were in full bloom. Fuseo came to play with my brother. When it was time to leave, he waved his hand and walked out with big steps. I was behind my brother, watching him go away. At that time, I was really looking forward to him looking back. Coincidentally, he did look back. Fuseo turned around, with a bright and cheerful smile. Before my brother could say anything, he said first, "Forgot to say goodbye to my sister. Sister, see you tomorrow." That moment was like a still oil painting. The sunlight was warm, and the flowers in the yard were blooming like snowdrifts. Fuseo's eyes were curved with a smile. My brother looked down at me, with a teasing smile in his eyes. "Actually, when you think about it, isn't it a kind of luck that our fate has come this far?" Originally, my calm life was injected with such a fresh element. It was like in the coldest winter, I was wrapped up tightly, but still had to move forward with my head down against the wind. But unexpectedly, a bunch of bright spring flowers burst into my sight. From then on, the tired traveler had something to look forward to. A long time ago, I heard that some people might never meet someone they truly like in their whole life. But I got in touch. If the story ended here, it would be a youth script full of regret and bitterness. But it took one more step forward, and the pointer fell into the world after adulthood, and then it became completely different. Fuseo, don't lie to me. You clearly know what I'm bothered by. You clearly could have handled it well, but you just let things ferment. Even if we don't divorce today, we will tomorrow. You might as well make a decision quickly now." Fuseo's eyelashes trembled slightly. After a long time, he finally opened his mouth, his voice hoarse. "Sophia, I only want you." He took my hand, his tone full of pleading. "You're the only one I have left. I won't see her again in the future. I promise you. Give me one more chance, okay? Please." He lowered his stance, holding my hand and trembling slightly. To make it easier to talk to me, he got down on one knee. I thought about it. Fuseo was indeed a person who kept his promises. My fingers traced his eyebrows and eyes, and I smiled. I gave an answer that seemed irrelevant, "No." As if he was too flustered, Fuseo finally remembered something and stammered, "Next week is your birthday." "Next week. I'll definitely make you happy, Sophia." I lowered my eyes to look at him and didn't say anything. Actually, every moment when I was accompanied by him made me feel happy. Except for today. On the night of my birthday, fireworks were set off for several hours in a city where fireworks were prohibited. Even I had to admit that Fuseo had really put some thought into it. I sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the gorgeous fireworks outside. Quite a number of people attended my birthday party. Besides a few close relatives and friends, I couldn't recognize the faces of most of the others. It was called a birthday party, but actually it was also a social occasion. Fuseo hadn't arrived yet. I didn't like socializing, so my brother was mingling with these people. At a certain moment, he took the opportunity to walk up behind me. "Happy birthday, Sophia." A wine glass was handed to me. When I was young, I always hid behind my brother. Later, it was Fuseo. My parents were always busy with work. It could be said that I was brought up almost under my brother's care. The person I trusted the most since childhood was my brother. Later, there was Fuseo too. Pulling back my thoughts, I smiled and clinked glasses with him. "Thank you, brother." He looked around and asked me, "Hasn't Fuseo come yet?" I tilted my head and pointed at the fireworks outside the window. Are they beautiful? I'm afraid he spent a lot of effort on them. Even if he's a bit late, I'll forgive him anyway. His tone was calm, and it was hard to tell whether he was happy or angry. That's what he should do. If you like them, you can set them off for fun not just on your birthday but also on ordinary days. I shook my head. I'm not that extravagant. He nodded indifferently. Since Fuseo hasn't come yet, I'll greet the guests on behalf of both of you first. You should urge him to hurry up. This is not proper. I lowered my head and sent a message to Fuseo. Suddenly there was a loud noise outside the window. I subconsciously raised my head and happened to see the fireworks staying in the air and forming several big words. Happy birthday, Sophia. It only lasted for a moment and then disappeared, shining brightly for just that instant. It felt like being loved briefly. When are you coming? Fuseo didn't reply to me. Instead, to liven up the atmosphere, one of the guests present took the initiative to say to me, "You two are really enviable." I read some entertainment news recently. It said that the young President Fuseo still couldn't forget his ex-girlfriend. At that time, I was wondering why you two could just sit tight and not explain. Now it seems that everyone lives their own life. Someone echoed, exactly. Now it's all right. Everyone has seen that they are a loving couple. It's not a loveless business marriage at all. My brother took the opportunity to say, Fuseo was in such a difficult situation at that time, but my sister still stayed by his side. It would be too fake to say there's no feeling between them. Whether they were sincere or not, most of the people invited had some kind of interest relationship with my family, so naturally they would only say nice things. Some people in the crowd had gloomy faces and didn't know what they were thinking. I didn't pay attention to them. The waiter brought a coat which made the atmosphere at the scene even more lively. He spoke loudly as if deliberately trying to make everyone present hear clearly. Fuseo was afraid that you might catch a cold, so he specially asked someone to send it over. Fuseo said he's still on the road and will be here soon. I took the paper bag and took out the item in front of everyone. It was a short white fur coat. Among the teasing voices in the room, a female voice let out a soft, huh. Seeing that everyone around was looking at her, she smiled sheepishly. I just feel something's not right. It seems this coat has been washed more than once. But think about it. How could Fuseo give Sophia something that has been washed several times? Maybe it's a design that I don't quite understand. I glanced at the fur coat in my hand. Before I could say anything, I heard someone laughing out loud without hesitation. No, what are you pretending for? You two are singing the same tune. I almost believed it. Take a look at your phones. There's a hot search. Fuseo is standing up for his ex-girlfriend. He got so angry for her sake. President Fuseo, who is usually so calm, also has moments when he loses control. Poor Sophia. She pursed her lips and looked at me with sarcasm in her eyes. There was a bit of a commotion at the scene. My brother's face darkened. I signaled him not to say anything. Bearing his worried look, I pressed my lips tightly together. My hand uncontrollably tapped on the screen and skillfully clicked into the hot search. The first hashtag was #Vivian Fuseo #, then further down there were #you dare touch her and try #, boyfriend power #. They occupied several top positions in a row. There was also a hot search that mentioned me, #who is Sophia #, presumably the grand fireworks show had caused a small-scale discussion on the internet. I shifted my gaze and clicked into the first hashtag. The video wasn't shot very clearly and the camera was shaking, but it was still possible to clearly distinguish Fuseo and Vivian. Vivian had a pale face and was trembling while hugging her arms. Fuseo's eyebrows and eyes were cold and sharp, his lips were pursed into a line, and his tone was aggressive. The voices in the video were very noisy and it was hard to hear clearly. But this couldn't stump the omnipotent netizens who were eager to gossip. Amid the noise all over the screen, they managed to make out Fuseo's words, "Don't you dare touch her again." His voice was tense and full of anger. My face became gloomier. I had never seen Fuseo so aggressive before. Fuseo's actions also explained everything because he reached out his hand to block Vivian behind him. He didn't even look back. It was so natural that it was done in one go. It was a subconscious protective action. Vivian immediately understood and moved behind him. Without any words, the two of them were already so in tune with each other. Some guests talked about me in a pitying tone. Although their voices were very low, they were still clear. I took a deep breath, trying to stay rational. The next second I still couldn't hold back the surging anger in my heart, because someone in the crowd asked, "Look at the video in real time." It seems that Vivian was wearing a white fur coat before. Was this directly taken off her and sent here as a birthday present? I found that video according to what she said. This video should have been shot before the incident. Vivian was wearing heavy makeup, bringing out her glamorous features to the fullest. The well-tailored black sequined evening dress was shimmering, and she was wearing a white fur coat outside, with a small part of her shoulders exposed. She looked bright and eye-catching. This video was different from the previous one and was shot very clearly. By comparing the two videos, it was easy to find that the coat she was wearing was the same as the one in my hand. Some people couldn't hold back their schadenfreude and sighed, "Tisk tsk, how pitiful." On her own birthday, her husband ran off to accompany his first love. And even the birthday present was something that others didn't want. She still regarded it as a treasure and was as happy as anything. What a silly girl. Looks of contempt or pity swept over me. Finally, my brother couldn't hold back anymore. The sound of the wine glass hitting the table was particularly harsh. "My sister has me and the support of the whole family. No matter what, she's not pitiful. When it's time to settle accounts later, we'll see who's pitiful." Suddenly the scene was quiet for a moment. But there were still some defiant voices. "We're doing this for her own good. Is it interesting to interfere in other people's relationships? I think it's not that you didn't respond, but that you couldn't respond. You forced Fuseo to marry you back then, and now you can't handle the situation." Her voice was shrill and sharp. I had already recognized that this was Vivian's friend. She was in the information I got before. I pinched my fingertips to calm down my mood. "Excuse me. I'd like to ask this lady, how did you get in? I don't remember inviting you to my birthday party. Are you someone's girlfriend here?" I tapped on the armrest of my wheelchair and smiled brightly. My brother glanced at me. "I'll ask someone to bring the guest list to check. It's very impolite to break into someone else's birthday party without permission. Lady, would you like to take a seat in the police station?" My brother was really intimidating when his face turned cold. She immediately turned pale and panicked, trying to grab something. The man beside her shook her off viciously and said ingratiatingly, "Sorry. She's just a little star following me. She's so ignorant. I'll teach her a good lesson when we get back." I sneered. "Forced Fuseo to marry? Go and find out whether it was him who begged me or I who begged him. I'm not that desperate to pick up trash." In front of everyone, I stuffed the coat back into the paper bag and threw the used tissues in as well. "Send it back and tell him he sent it to the wrong person. Why do you all have such expressions? I remember today is my birthday party, not my wedding anniversary. There's no need to pity me like this. The banquet doesn't have to be cancelled. Let's continue." Someone came out to smooth things over. Coupled with my brother's attitude and my actions, no one came out to make trouble anymore, and the banquet continued. I swept my gaze over everyone present. In the corner, Vivian's friend, with tears all over her face, raised her head and had a brief eye contact with me. By the time Fuseo arrived at the scene, the birthday banquet was almost coming to an end. He had no idea about what had happened and rushed towards me with an anxious look on his face, his tone carrying a slight pant. "Sophia, I'm sorry. Something held me up. I'll apologize to you properly another day." Just as usual, he wanted to hold my hand, but I turned my hand aside to avoid it. Fuseo's hand froze awkwardly in the air. He still wanted to continue apologizing, but my brother interrupted him coldly. "You've got some nerve. On my sister's birthday, you went to see your first love and it even got on the hot search. She sent the clothes she didn't want to my sister. Fuseo, you're really something." The angrier my brother got as he went on, He grabbed Fuseo by the collar. There was a whooshing sound as his clenched fist landed on Fuseo's face, which immediately swelled and turned red. Fuseo casually wiped his face with his fingertip and called my name, Sophia. Whoever it was, even if it was my bidding rival standing there today, I would still stand up and help her. If I just stood by when a woman was being verbally harassed, you wouldn't like me like that. I almost wanted to applaud him. His excuse was really impeccable. Fuseo wearily pinched the space between his eyebrows. The clothes were mixed up. There were 2 identical bags, and the assistant sent the ones that Vivian wore to you. Your birthday has been ruined because of me. I'm sorry. I leaned back a little, feeling a tinge of bitterness in my heart. You promised not to see her again. You made that promise yourself. I didn't force you. Fuseo, that's it. Let's get divorced. Fuseo's face tightened, and he didn't say a word. I slightly lifted my chin and said in a light tone. Our married life is over. You don't have to tell me anything you do in the future. Cheer up. I smiled at him. Fuseo looked at me in disbelief. Sophia, you can't do this. Believe me, I have nothing to do with her. In the corner, a flash went off. Vivian committed suicide. This was like a stone creating 1,000 ripples. The crowd that had just quieted down burst out in exclamations. Fuseo turned sideways, trying to find the person who said that. But he finally returned empty-handed. He stood there blankly, his body rigid and motionless. After about half a minute, as if he could no longer hide his emotions, Fuseo muttered. Sophia, it's a human life after all. I watched him as he ran out without looking back, his hands shaking when he pushed aside the people in his way. After all, he couldn't deceive himself. I laughed at myself. My brother put a hand on my shoulder and patted it gently, like a silent comfort. I shook my head. It's okay. Don't worry about me. Just like in the past many years, I would tell the people around me that it was okay. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if I couldn't put it into action, if I couldn't live a normal life, or if I was pitted or looked down upon. I could handle it. More than 700 years ago, Guan Hanqing wrote such a line in an opera. I am a copper pea that can't be steamed soft, boiled tender, flattened by pounding, or popped by frying, a resounding copper pea. When I was very young, I made up my mind to be such a copper pea. Vivian accompanied him through difficulties, and I helped him regain a firm foothold in the company. Was her love pure and great, and mine not? Was she noble because she was beautiful and healthy, and was I lowly because I was disabled? It wasn't like that. Since he was with me, he should have bid farewell to the past. If he didn't, it was his incompetence and his baseness. So, it didn't matter. It was just a trifle. Thank you all for coming here, especially for me today. I smiled with my lips raised. Just now, I made an important decision in my life. I decided to part with Fuseo, and from now on, we'll have nothing to do with each other. Thank you all for witnessing this special moment too. I've ended my unhappy marriage. Please congratulate me. My brother was the first to applaud and praised me. Brave sister, you're really amazing. Some people who were close to my family expressed their opinions one after another. Among the sincere or insincere blessings, I smiled wholeheartedly. A video of Fuseo leaving the scene in a state of losing composure after abandoning me quietly began to spread. The video was recorded in great detail, starting from my birthday banquet and ending with me raising my glass to invite everyone to congratulate me on the end of my marriage. Netizens were all shocked, and relevant keywords quietly climbed onto the tail of the hot search. The keywords slowly rose. Some bloggers noticed it and, with their sharp intuition, grasped the key points at once and quickly made videos. Gossip about wealthy families, popular actresses, ex-girlfriends and current wives, each of these was a hot topic on its own, let alone when combined together. With all kinds of opinions, that detailed video was widely circulated. The segment where Fuseo apologized in a low voice was particularly clear, directly breaking the online brainwashing narrative that he and I were forced into an arranged marriage. At the same time, my life experiences were dug up. When Fuseo just returned to the country, I stood firmly by his side without hesitation. Many people with inside knowledge came forward to testify. I was afraid of being scolded before and didn't dare to say anything. Now I can finally speak up boldly. It was definitely not a business marriage. At that time, Fuseo couldn't have reached her family's level no matter what. Fuseo returned to the country after breaking up with his ex-girlfriend and started chasing Sophia. After the two got together, it was this young lady who overrode all objections to be with him. I'm telling the truth. Just ask any internal employee, and they'll all know. Sophia's family didn't agree at all. This young lady was really stubborn and insisted on it. As a result, she was directly transferred away from the power center and suspended from work for nearly half a year. Finally, her family felt sorry for her and reluctantly agreed. I was in the same class as Sophia in college. I often saw her being sent to school and college. Her family was so wealthy, but she never missed a class and her grades were very good. Since I was the class monitor, I had some contact with her. She gave up many important awards directly and didn't apply for them. At first, I thought she thought it was too troublesome and didn't ask further. Once we talked about it, and she said that she could enter her family's company after graduation, so she didn't apply for them and left them for classmates who could use them. Do you understand how I felt at that time? She's really a nice person. Since you've all spoken, I'll also say something. A colleague heard her arguing with her brother because of Fuseo. She begged her brother to help Fuseo. Fuseo was right there at that time, saying that he would definitely treat Sophia well and asked her brother to rest assured. Fuseo is capable, but there are many capable people. Why could Fuseo rise so quickly? Without Sophia, he wouldn't be where he is today. When I saw the hot search before, even as an outsider, I felt disgusted. People can't be so ungrateful. This sister has a kind heart. There was an old scavenger on our street who hadn't reached the retirement age yet. Because his original company went bankrupt, he could only pick up trash to make a living. But scavenging also has its territories. Once, the old man was bullied by other homeless people and beaten to the ground just because he picked up a few bottles. After Sophia knew about it, she arranged for the old man to see a doctor and found a suitable job for him. Why do I know about this? Because that homeless old man is my grandmother. The reason why I'm still studying instead of dropping out to work is because of Sophia. Sophia is very capable at work. Everyone who has worked with her can see that. She also doesn't put on airs. What I find most remarkable about her is that she doesn't feel inferior because of her disability. When it comes to disability, she won't be hurt at all. She'll share her life with a smile. I hope she won't be so blind in love anymore. Fuseo isn't stupid. Would he marry Sophia if he didn't want to? He came to customize the wedding dress himself on the wedding day and discussed with the designer for a long time. There was no sign of reluctance throughout the whole process. He couldn't let go of his ex-girlfriend but could still act so happy. Men are really born actors. The public opinion quickly shifted. As the victim, I won countless sympathies. Netizens who couldn't find my Weibo kept leaving messages under the company's account. Sister, please wake up, okay? He's treated you like that. You should love yourself. It doesn't matter if your legs can't stand up. Our hearts should stand up. Don't look down on yourself. Can you ask your young lady to open her eyes wider? Can you be less strict about gender? I'm much better than that guy. Sister, look at me. I'm really good at cooking. Some sincere netizens wrote long comments, while those who just wanted to have fun were making jokes. For a while, this incident dominated the hot search. Suddenly, a new keyword appeared on the hot search, #Fuseo leaking secrets according to a gossip source. In the early days, in order to gain a firm foothold in the company and suppress the illegitimate children in the family, Fuseo didn't hesitate to leak commercial secrets to gain the upper hand. The gossip source provided quite a lot of evidence, including the following cases. In a public bidding project, the rival company's bid was only slightly lower than that of the Fuseo family. After Fuseo joined the Fuseo family, a certain exclusive technology mastered by the Fuseo family was cracked by a third-party company. The information within the internal project teams of the Fuseo family didn't communicate with each other, but the rival company seemed to be miraculously able to release competing products in advance time and time again. The internationally recognized Golden Public Relations Time refers to the first 24 hours after a public opinion incident occurs. The initial 24 hours are crucial. If it's not handled properly, the losses caused will be hard to recover. However, strangely enough, the Fuseo family group remained silent and didn't respond. Despite a large number of hot search topics, the Fuseo family group still didn't respond, and its stock price dropped significantly. The drop in the stock price led to a large number of people selling off their shares, developing in an uncontrollable direction. The situation became more and more serious. 40 hours after the incident occurred, the Fuseo family group held an emergency meeting and announced that it would conduct a thorough investigation into this matter. After reading the news, my brother carefully observed my expression. Perhaps seeing nothing unusual, he asked me, "Sophia, are you really not regretting it?" "Brother, you said that delicate flowers aren't raised in wealthy families." I suddenly looked out of the window and said, "I want to climb the mountain, the one you took me to for the first time. Take me there again." My brother was obviously hesitant. I saw his uneasiness and took the initiative to say, "It has nothing to do with Fuseo. I just want to see the sunrise that day again. It was so beautiful. The first time I climbed the mountain, my brother and Fuseo took me up. My brother carried me, and Fuseo carried my wheelchair. We originally planned to watch the sunset, but because I and my wheelchair slowed them down seriously, we had to change it to watching the sunrise. I felt a bit guilty." Fuseo noticed it and said to me in an extremely exaggerated tone, "We should really thank our sister. If it weren't for her, I would never have seen such a beautiful sunrise in my life. With our sister around, even a guy as unlucky as me can become a lucky one." I was still touched by his words at that time. Suddenly, he called my name seriously and then said, "Look, the sunrise is so beautiful." Thinking about it now, probably it was at that time that I began to be willing to open my heart to him. My brother is no longer the reckless young man he used to be. In order to give me the best experience, he cleared the mountain in advance and booked it exclusively. A large number of people followed behind us in case of any accidents. Am I much heavier? My brother looked down at me and said, "I've been working out." "You're growing up, and so am I, Sophia, people do change." I didn't say anything more. The process of climbing the mountain was actually quite boring. I huddled in my brother's arms, feeling sleepy and unable to find the joy I had when climbing the mountain for the first time. When we reached the top of the mountain, there were less than 2 hours left before sunrise. I couldn't fall asleep and just waited with my eyes open. The sound of the wind blowing by my ears, the sound of the leaves swaying, and my own breathing, all these sounds came to my ears. The air was damp and cold, and the sky was hazy. The blackness was gradually fading away. The scenery in front of me gradually became clear, and the sunlight poured down. The sun came out. I watched it quietly for a long time. Long enough for me to finally be sure that I could completely break away from the past. As the seasons change, I still want to be myself again, to be a snow-capped mountain. After I got home, I found that Fuseo had sent me countless messages and made countless phone calls. When he left me to find Vivian, I had set his messages to do not disturb and his incoming calls to silent mode without any notifications. Calculating by the time when my brother took me mountain climbing, he tried to contact me. I dialed back. As soon as the call was connected, Fuseo couldn't wait to say, "Sophia, where are you? I'm really worried about you." I chuckled softly, "Why are you worried about me? I'm perfectly fine." There was silence on the other end for a moment as if it was hard for him to speak. After a pause, he said, "I suspect someone is plotting against me behind my back. Could you please help me? Maybe I'll need your family to lend a hand." I touched the armrest of my wheelchair and said in a pleasant voice, "No way. I want a divorce from you. Do you understand human language?" Fuseo's breathing became a bit heavier for an instant. A weak female voice came from the other end, don't misunderstand. There's no possibility between Fuseo and me. Otherwise, you two wouldn't have gotten married. He's very worried about you. Yesterday, he found out where you were and walked 30 kilometers on foot to look for you. He's just so worried that he can't think clearly. He loves you very much. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. He's quite a walker. He's suitable for marathons. If I wanted, there would be plenty of people willing to walk 3,000 miles for me. What is he? If you like him, you can keep him. Before she could say anything, I hung up the phone. In the last second before the call was disconnected, I heard Fuseo seem to be choking and saying something. It sounded like he was crying. On the 5th day after the incident happened, the Fuseo family group issued an announcement. It was true that Fuseo had leaked commercial secrets, and the company would sue him for the crime of infringing on commercial secrets. His situation was especially serious, causing huge losses to the Fuseo family group, and due to his personal reasons, the company's stock price dropped severely. In this case, Fuseo was bound to go to prison. There were still unfinished projects under his name, and many customers who had purchased from him demanded multiple compensations one after another. At this time, if we got divorced, he could take away half of my property. Fuseo didn't pester me anymore and chose to divorce me. However, when it came to the division of property, he suddenly found out that all the property I was currently using was premarital property. During the marriage, I had no income. He swallowed with difficulty. Sophia. How could you be so selfish? He banged on the table loudly. He was like a mad beast with his eyes red. You've been on guard against me from the beginning to the end. I looked up, met his disbelieving eyes, and smiled. Wealthy families don't raise delicate flowers. There were always people who thought that by getting involved with a girl from a wealthy family, they could become rich and prosperous. Little did they know that those girls were never taught to be sensible and selfless since childhood. What we had been learning was always the cruel competition logic of survival of the fittest. We can live without being loved, without being cared for, and without believing in fairy tales. We grow upward, we are tenacious, and we always love ourselves the most. Fuseo nodded firmly, gritting his teeth and said, "You're so ruthless. Our relationship over the years isn't worth even a bit of your nostalgia. Then I don't feel guilty towards you anymore." He relaxed his posture, and his tone had a sense of going all out. He transferred his property under his name to Vivian to avoid responsibility. The lawyer looked troubled. Fuseo leaned against the wall as if he had lost all his strength. "Sophia, I really didn't expect you to be so ruthless." He looked very tired, and his tone concealed an unmistakable exhaustion. I have to say that Fuseo was really capable. He always had a backup plan and always held the initiative in his own hands. Knowing that he might face huge compensations and go bankrupt, after finding that things were out of control, he quickly transferred his property under his name to Vivian. He really deserved to be the lover who had shared hardships with him in his youth. At the end of the road, he still thought of her. Just as I was thinking about this, the door was pushed open. Vivian, dressed simply and plainly, walked in. Fuseo looked at her. "Why are you here?" "Don't worry. I'll handle these things soon." Her tone was gentle, without any sign of irritability. She could be considered someone who could achieve great things. Vivian glanced at him and ignored him. Immediately, she walked up to me in Fuseo's incredulous gaze and said seriously, "Promise me that you'll promote me." I said yes and nodded gently at the same time. "Of course. I'll make you famous so that your fans will be proud of you." Fuseo suddenly stood up, his eyes bloodshot and looking furious. I waved my hand, and immediately 2 bodyguards stepped forward to stop Fuseo's next move. I looked at Fuseo and smiled gently. Didn't I say it before? I hate it the most when others bet on my sincerity. You used me, and I used you, all for money. We're even now. I patted the armrest of my wheelchair. Vivian signaled my assistant to let her push it. There was a loud crashing sound from behind. The lawyer kindly reminded him, "Fuseo, the things here are very expensive. If you smash them all, it'll be a considerable amount." There was silence on the other end for a second. I was pushed out of the room and greeted by a sea of green. The sunlight was bright, and the tree shadows were dappled. It made people feel warm. Wealthy families don't raise delicate flowers. My family has accumulated enough wealth through the inheritance and accumulation of generations after generations, and only then have we had such a prosperous life today. I can be a fool, but I will never be allowed to be a fool who only has love in her mind. On the very day when Fuseo just returned to China, my brother warned me, he has a girlfriend abroad who he's been with for many years. If he shows his affection to you, don't be fooled. Fuseo is my brother. I know what kind of person he is better than you do. I was sitting next to my brother pruning flower branches. Hearing this, I stopped what I was doing and said seriously, then let's give it a try. If he asks me for help, I'll help him once. I would help him once without asking for anything in return. If he lies to me, I'll be with him. Just for fun. When I get tired of it, I turned my head and smiled at my brother, then continued, Brother, Fuseo still has some value for us to use, right? In the moment when our eyes met, my brother understood what I meant. He pondered for a while and then cautioned, be careful. Since Fuseo said he loved me, I had decided not to love him anymore. He hadn't fallen in love with me during the more than 10 years we spent together, but he could fall in love when he needed my help. I naturally knew how much of it was real. My brother said that the greatest meaning of life lies in experiencing. The person I had my eyes on in my girlhood stood beside me, took good care of me carefully, and said that he loved me. It was a really wonderful experience. So I fully immersed myself in it and responded to his love. I was cautious at every step. I really felt sorry for him when I should, and I did have some feelings for him, but it was also true that I wanted his family's money. I played my part so well that no one doubted me, and Fuseo naturally had no guard against me. When he was struggling in pain, I firmly held his hand. When he looked back at me gently, I really felt sorry for him. When he achieved something and his first reaction was to bend down and hug me, I still felt my heart flutter. On those long nights when he gently patted my back to lull me to sleep, I remembered the mountain we climbed together in my girlhood and the sunrise on that mountain. It was the most beautiful one I had ever seen in my life. When I made Tola a little and he lowered his head to comfort me and told me not to be afraid, I would recall his kindness all night long. When I said that I wanted to eat the noodles he cooked and he was willing to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to make them for me, I was full of gratitude when I looked at him. But I had never wavered in my determination. I didn't mind that he had loved others, but I hated that he said he loved me just to use me. From the moment he used me, there was no possibility for us to have a good ending. When my brother said that if I didn't break free, I might not be able to break free anymore, I arranged for someone to carefully prepare a new drama for Vivian. The role of the beautiful and bad femme fatale that made Vivian famous overnight was tailor-made for her by the ace team of our family's film and television company. The so-called netizens digging into her background was also the information that I had someone release. Actually, I wasn't too ruthless. I even left a way out for Fuseo. As long as he didn't waver in the face of Vivian's bitter pleading, I would leave him his last bit of dignity. It was just a pity that after achieving fame and fortune, what a man wanted to see the most was the plot where his ex-girlfriend regretted and came back to him. Fuseo was no exception. Since he liked it, I would create a new plot tailored for him. From Vivian's background being dug out by netizens to Vivian taking the initiative to contact Fuseo and then to Vivian's feigned suicide, every time node was carefully arranged by me. When Vivian's background was dug out, I didn't respond and arranged for special people to guide the public opinion. Fuseo played the hero to save the beauty and the popularity rose to a new height again, reaching the peak of public opinion. When netizens were so excited about their story that they couldn't think clearly, I released the video of Fuseo leaving me and arranged for the big bloggers and promoters under our company to prepare at the same time. Aiming to achieve the backlash of public opinion and the reversal of reputation, besides having Vivian feign suicide to hold Fuseo back, I also prepared a series of big gifts for him. With so many things to distract him, it was impossible for the Fuseo family group to contact him within 24 hours. The information released by the so-called rumor spreader was also what I had prepared long ago. Since Fuseo and I got engaged, my brother and I had been preparing for these things. It was impossible for us not to hold Fuseo's handle and help him without any complaints or regrets. His going astray also had something to do with certain external forces guiding him. Fuseo thought he was in control of the whole situation. Little did he know that I had carefully calculated every step. We had already arranged quite a number of people inside the Fuseo family group. Over such a long period of time, we also won over new major shareholders. They signed a concerted action agreement with me. It was imperative to conduct a thorough investigation and sue Fuseo. Under my deliberate arrangement, the work of finding evidence was completed on the same day. But to avoid arousing Fuseo's suspicion, I deliberately delayed it for a few days. When the stock price of the Fuseo family group dropped sharply, my brother was arranging for people to acquire a large number of shares. The actual controlling stake of the Fuseo family fell into the hands of people with other surnames. The fatal blow to Fuseo was that the wealth he had worked hard to accumulate over the years came to nothing. I didn't expect Vivian to be so capable that she coaxed Fuseo into transferring his property under his name to her. That saved me a lot of trouble. As for how to persuade Vivian, it was even simpler. I don't believe that someone who has stood at the top would be willing to be inferior to others. What's more, in the entertainment industry, which is a Vanity Fair, some people regard her as a goddess, some people shout for her with all their might, and some people travel thousands of miles to be by her side. Some people take an 8-hour hard-seat train ride just to take a look at the place where she lives. And some people get excited for years because of her words. Nothing is purer than the love of fans. Even if Vivian wouldn't bow to power, she couldn't resist this love. I promised her that I would do my best to promote her and make her a household name. After a little hesitation, Vivian accepted my offer. A man's sincerity changes in an instant, while the love of fans is so abundant that it can never be used up. More importantly, beside Fuseo, Vivian was just an accessory. But with me, she was Vivian, she was herself. Women may not need love. But we need wealth, power, status, and freedom. We hit it off immediately. In the end, Fuseo was sentenced to 10 years in prison and also imposed a huge fine. Although currently Fuseo doesn't have any property under his name that can be used for payment, the court will still check the property situation under his name from time to time. Once it discovers any property that can be executed, it will recover the fine at any time. He lost both fame and fortune, as well as his wealth and power. As for me, I possess so much property that I can never spend it all in my lifetime and am shining brightly in the fields that I love. With the help of her team, her own efforts, and the attitude of never getting involved in scandals, Vivian has become extremely popular. That ordinary friend of hers will occasionally play some minor roles. That ordinary friend loves to play the role of the female lead's best friend the most. In the words of netizens, in novels, what the second male lead does is actually done by the best friend in reality. She doesn't care whether Vivian plays the female lead, the second female lead, or the third female lead. She doesn't care whether the role is positive or not. All she knows is that her friend will never do anything despicable. We are all moving forward with high spirits. We all have a bright future. On the day when Justin's first love hit me with her car, I was sent to the ICU while she was taken to the police station. And Justin went to accompany his first love, who was in tears for the whole night. When he finally remembered to come and see me, the first thing he said beside my hospital bed was, "Could you please sign the letter of understanding? It was just an accident. Cindy didn't do it on purpose." He also said, "Cindy was so scared at that time. As her elder brother, I couldn't leave her alone. Grace, you've always been the kindest." I turned my head and looked at the dark red setting sun outside the window of the ward. "Justin, the world is like a huge parcel pickup station." Justin frowned. "What do you mean?" I shifted my gaze back. "Some people are just like big parcels. He didn't know that in this car accident my brain was damaged and my emotional center was severely damaged. I lost part of my memory and my temperament changed a lot. Since then, I'm no longer the lovesick fool who had loved him for 8 years. Now, I'm Shin, the super fun-loving Grace. Justin was stunned. Grace, how can you talk like this? Sorry, I waved my hands repeatedly. I don't live in Notre Dame de Paris, so I'm not good at communicating with saints. Justin's face was a mixture of shock and anger, but I still didn't shut up. While having a fiancé, you selflessly cared for the single little sister and stayed with her all night. You're really an angel of universal love. Don't describe me and Cindy in such a bad way. He was so angry that his face turned red. Not a saint? I analyzed seriously. That's right. You're just being generous with other people's things. Then you're just a bad guy. You. Justin stood up. I quickly greeted him. Why are you being so polite? Sit down, sit down. However, Justin, you're really bad at handling things, I sighed. When visiting a patient who just got out of the ICU, you didn't even bother to bring a fruit basket. Justin looked at me with a sneer. A fruit basket? Do you deserve it? Why doesn't she deserve it? President G, you have a short memory. I'm afraid you've forgotten that you and Grace were supposed to get married this month. A clear voice came from the door of the ward. I turned my head to look. Cousin Norma was pushing a wheelchair and walking in. Grace, Dr. Gao asked you to go to the electroencephalogram room for an examination. She walked past Justin, giving him a sideways glance. You'd better leave quickly. We can't afford to serve a big shot like you here. Electroencephalogram room? Justin glanced at me. Grace, it seems that your brain was really damaged in the accident. Yes, I pointed at him. Although it's me whose brain was damaged, it's you who lost your memory. Don't you remember who the perpetrator was? Justin was stunned for a moment and his face showed a bit of embarrassment and guilt that he seemed to want to hold my hand. Grace, Norma interrupted with a cold laugh. How could he forget? Unfortunately, that's his beloved little sweetheart. Before you two even got married, you bullied Grace like this. You're really heartless and a perfect match. Justin's face gradually became a bit awkward. He hurriedly got up and said coldly to me, considering your injury, I won't say much. You must sign the letter of understanding, or I won't pay your hospital bill. He looked at Norma. You've stayed in the ICU for so many days. The cost must be quite high, right? You. Norma was so angry that she couldn't speak. Justin gave me a look that seemed to say, reflect on yourself, and left in big strides. Look at this Justin. He's really something. He's already learned to threaten people with money. I pointed at his back and said. Justin's face gradually became a bit awkward. He hurriedly got up and said coldly to me, considering your injury, I won't say much. Norma looked at Justin's back and then at me and sighed, let's go for the examination first. There's no problem with my muscle strength and sense of touch. My spinal cord was slightly damaged but the recovery is going well. It's really a miracle, Dr. Gao exclaimed. Do you still remember what you looked like after being hit? But you should be able to walk around tomorrow. Yes, I remember. I was hit and flew into the air, did a 720-degree spin 3 times like Thomas, and then plunged headfirst into the flower bed, I answered seriously. Forget it, Dr. Gao lowered his head to write the injury examination report. How's Grace's brain injury? Norma asked worriedly. Dr. Gao rested his chin on one hand and looked at the electroencephalogram seeming to be deep in thought. It's not normal. But judging from her speech and behavior, there's no difference from a normal person. Grace is very different from before, Norma said eagerly. Before, she was a weak and gentle person, and was completely controlled by her fiancé. But now? I looked at her expectantly. Now Grace is much more sober, but I always feel that she seems a bit too lively. Norma's voice grew lower and lower as she spoke. Sometimes I even feel that she has completely become another person. Yes. Dr. Gao listened carefully. This may be a personality change caused by brain damage, or it may be a psychological self-defense mechanism after experiencing a major blow. What's the degree of the injury? Norma was worried. Dr. Gao, we'll have to file a lawsuit against the perpetrator later. I've determined it as a first-degree minor injury. Dr. Gao tapped on the keyboard. Although when you were sent here by the ambulance, I thought it must be a serious injury at least, but you've recovered unusually well. The damage to the nervous system can be almost ignored, but the scalp injury and laceration have reached the standard of a minor injury. How do you feel yourself? He turned to me. I feel great. I sat in the wheelchair swinging my legs. I think I can get out of the wheelchair and dance a kawaii cute gomen right now. I started singing, Chew. Kawaii cute gomen. MMM. Norma quickly covered my mouth. Umarit Kashat Gomen. Dr. Gao actually continued listening. Not bad. Your thinking is quite active. He continued to ask me, Norma said your personality has changed. What do you think? I don't really feel anything, I told the truth. I still remember most of the things before the car accident, but I just remember them, as if I watched another person's life from the perspective of a bystander, just like watching a TV series. So now I think I'm the heroine of a tragic story. I gradually showed a sinister smile on my face. Dr. Gao, are you the affectionate male supporting role assigned to me by the system? Norma and Dr. Gao looked at me in surprise and then they looked at each other simultaneously and shook their heads at the same time. Send her to the psychiatric department. Dr. Gao wrote a referral form for me. She definitely has delusions. Actually, I really think so. After an 8-year long-distance relationship while other men would spoil their girlfriends like princesses, Justin made me the heroine of a tragic story. Looking back on my experiences over the years, I think I could be named the Dean of a Women's Virtue Academy. I remember when Justin went abroad for further studies, leaving me alone and waiting for him for 3 whole years. I remember that before he went abroad, I found his ambiguous chat records with Cindy, his childhood playmate, but I chose to forgive him. I remember that after he returned to China, he told me that he wanted to establish a private hospital. I gave up my job as a designer and worked hard as his assistant, without asking for a position or shares. I remember that after all the hardships we went through to establish the Jiying Hospital together, it was Cindy who stood beside him at the ribbon cutting and opening ceremony. I remember that as Justin's net worth grew higher and higher, there were rumors about him and Cindy all over the internet, even though we were already engaged. I remember that at that time, our classmates reminded me that Justin and Cindy were studying in the same school when he was abroad. There are countless such things, and I could write them all down in a 63-page PDF. I worked hard without complaint, and adhered to the 3 obediences and 4 virtues. Except for not giving birth to a son for Justin's family, I was almost like the heroine of The Way of the Mother. However, what was the return? It was blatant cheating, and the embarrassing situation of losing both love and money. Even when I was almost killed by his mistress, I wasn't even worthy of being considered by him first. Apart from this empty title of fiancé, I got nothing. I mourned the 8 years I spent with this scumbag in my heart and couldn't help sighing. Grace, why were you so stupid? I don't know if I was cursed in the first half of my life. There were so many good men in the world, but I only had eyes for Justin, who was like rotten vegetable leaves. This car accident actually knocked my lovesick brain away. It has to be said that it was a blessing in disguise. He's so infatuated with Cindy. Well, let them live happily ever after. I won't get involved anymore, but I still have to get the compensation from Cindy's family. I've sacrificed so much over the years. If I don't make a good profit back, I won't be able to swallow this anger now. I was in the outpatient department of the psychiatric department, telling the doctor some dark jokes. Do you know, doctor, that Emperor Qin Shi Huang was the best live streaming host for promoting products, I said. Doctor, because all the books he liked became popular and everyone fell for them, I continued. Doctor, 3 parts of restraint, 3 parts of wanting to laugh, and 4 parts of merit -1. Doctor, do you know the difference between Jesus and the portrait of Jesus? Considering that it's cognitive confusion caused by brain damage, the doctor typed on the medical record quickly. In short, she's not psychotic. She just has some problems with her brain. Norma asked carefully, isn't having problems with the brain the same as being psychotic? Serious cognitive confusion can be considered as psychosis, but she hasn't reached that level yet, the doctor replied without hesitation. Have a good rest and just observe for now. Also, read fewer dark jokes. Walking back to the ward, Norma seemed to want to say something but hesitated. I asked her what she wanted to say, and Norma finally couldn't help asking, Grace, is what you told Dr. Gao true? Yes, it's true. I'm the heroine of a tragic story who transmigrated here. I need to kick the scumbag, beat up the mistress, and then go to the peak of life with the affectionate male lead number 2, I whistled. Stop talking nonsense, Norma rubbed her forehead with a headache. Grace, I know your brain was really damaged. But I think it's not a bad thing. I always thought Justin wasn't a good person, but you were so deeply involved that you wouldn't listen no matter how much I tried to persuade you. If it was this car accident that woke you up, then I think you're also lucky in misfortune. I think so too, I smiled at her. But it's different from now on. Now it's a brand new Grace, a brand new blackened heroine, a brand new me. Norma gave me a speechless look. In these past few days, she had already gotten used to my crazy appearance. By the way, sis, why have you been the only one here during this period? Where's Dad? I've had such a big accident. Why didn't he come to see me? Norma was stunned for a moment, looked at me, and suddenly there was sadness in her eyes. Something happened in your family? Did you forget? Well, it's better if you forgot. I suddenly remembered something and my heart skipped a beat. I touched my head and shut my mouth. Things weren't too bad, fortunately. A month later, I had already met the discharge criteria. Not bad, not bad. The limb muscle strength is normal and there's no disability. Dr. Gao was doing the examination for me while talking to Norma. This is a case with a very good recovery. Her family members took really good care of her, the nurse said as she took down the 4 bottle with one hand and gestured towards Norma with her mouth. Grace's sister is really nice and more considerate than many parents who accompany their patients. For a month, neither Justin nor any of my family members showed up again. Norma had been taking leave to accompany me, and her company couldn't tolerate it any longer. Last week, I saw her walking to a corner to answer the phone in a low voice. This week, it seemed that no calls came in anymore. I'll have to settle this score with the perpetrator. While I was in the hospital, the police came to see me. I gave them a very definite reply. I wouldn't issue a letter of understanding. The Eagle River Group, which is the company controlled by the Chi family, also sent people to see me. But at that time, I was seriously injured, so they just left after putting down some gifts. I'm sure that people from the Chi family would come again. During my rehabilitation period, my boss before the car accident called to inform me that I had been fired, and Norma also started looking for a new job. The only thing Justin did was to pay the initial medical expenses in advance. But it doesn't matter. This scumbag man's only use to me now is to give me money. The day before I was discharged from the hospital, Justin lost in the endurance competition between him and me. He called me and said in a tired voice that he was very busy. Grace, would you please agree to issue the letter of understanding? I'm really in a terrible mess now. The hospital business and Cindy are all things that I can't handle. Could you understand me, please? Don't talk about understanding. Let's talk about money. I was eating a banana with a smile on my face. Rich guy, transfer 500,000 yuan to me to show your strength. I could feel his silence. So I started to pour out my bitterness. Justin, now I've lost my job and I'm short of money. You need the letter of understanding to save your little lover, and I need money. Isn't it a fair exchange? Sometimes I'm really puzzled, Justin, there was confusion in my voice. Our free love has come to this point. I have to say that you're really a jerk. His voice seemed to be filled with anger again. I don't want to talk about this with you, Grace. Since you woke up, you've become very unreasonable. Wrong answer. I made a robotic voice. Please recognize the current situation. Only money can make people reasonable, a lot of money, I decided not to argue with him anymore. If you're with Cindy, you should also inform her family. Be sensible. The right to issue the letter of understanding is in my hands. Then I hung up the phone neatly. Capitalists are really stingy. Justin only transferred 100,000 yuan to me, which showed that he didn't have much strength at all. However, with this money, I managed to settle the subsequent hospital bills. After I was finally able to walk freely, I went to the police station to accept mediation. Unexpectedly, I met Cindy there. This was the first time I had seen her face to face after the car accident. Cindy fled after causing the traffic accident and was detained by the police the next day. However, her family quickly bailed her out, so that she could now stand in front of me and rant, "Grace, you bitch. Why aren't you dead yet?" I was extremely surprised. "You're still alive. Why should I be dead?" She was held by her mother, her eyes were red, and she seemed to want to swallow me up. "If it weren't for you, Justin and I would have been fine long ago." I turned around and asked the policeman, "Does she have manic disorder?" The young policeman looked a bit helpless. "Miss Cindy has some mental illness and is currently receiving medical treatment outside prison." Cindy was firmly held by her family, but she was still crying and shouting at me, "Why don't you go to hell? Why don't you die?" The noblewoman who looked like Cindy's mother hurriedly dragged her aside, muttering, "I shouldn't have brought you here." I spread my hands to the policeman. "Sir, please judge. Can I give my understanding in this situation?" The young policeman coughed lightly and touched his nose uncomfortably. "Ms. Grace, we couldn't get in touch with your family members before. We asked you to come here today to sign the letter of understanding. How much compensation can I get?" I asked him. "According to the previous negotiation with Ms. Lana, Cindy's family will compensate you for your medical expenses, mental damage fees, lost work fees and so on, totaling 500,000 yuan. If it's not enough, we can add more." The woman who looked like Cindy's mother walked towards me gracefully. She was wearing an expensive-looking cheongsam, with willow leaf-shaped eyebrows and upturned eyes, looking quite imposing. "I'm Lana, Cindy's mother." She didn't even look at me directly. "I hope the matter of understanding can be settled today. If you have any requests, please raise them as soon as possible. Where's the money?" I looked at this noble lady and asked, "You sign the letter of understanding first, and we'll transfer the compensation money later." She looked a bit impatient. "All right, so this is how you want to play, huh? Very well," I smiled politely. "I don't intend to give my understanding." Lana's beautiful eyes widened and fell on me. "Madam, you're the wife of the chairman of the Eagle River Group. 500,000 yuan. Are you trying to treat me like a beggar?" I said righteously. "I'd like to ask, if I don't give my consent." I turned to the young policeman. The young policeman looked very troubled. "She may be prosecuted. Hit and run in a traffic accident is a criminal case. Although Miss Cindy has a mental illness, it's not enough to completely escape criminal liability. I've said that you can raise any requests you have, and we can add more money." Lana glared at me, her eyes full of intimidation. 600,000 yuan, 700,000 yuan, there's no problem. 10 million yuan. I asked for an exorbitant price. "Are you crazy?" Lana's delicately made-up facial features began to distort. "Don't you know who you are? How dare you talk to me like that?" I frowned. "Madam of the Eagle River Group, can't you afford 10 million yuan?" I was a bit confused. I even wanted to ask for more. "You." Lana seemed to have been hit where it hurt. She walked towards me in 2 or 3 steps, raised her hand and was about to slap me in the face. "Is the upper class so uncivilized?" I was shocked and immediately lay down on the ground. "Someone is hitting people. The wife of Chairman Chi is hitting people. Family members of the perpetrator, calm down." The young policeman quickly pulled the furious Lana. From the troubled look on his face, I understood. I was in the right in this case, but in Tan City, it seemed that no one dared to offend the Chi family of the Eagle River Group. Just as I was thinking about what to do next, suddenly a person rushed in through the door. Following behind him was Cindy, who had been crying and shouting just now. Grace, stop making a fuss. What's the matter with you? Sign the letter of understanding first, and we'll talk about our business later. Justin's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked at me menacingly. Cindy took the opportunity to lean on him, and her tears were falling like beads with a broken string. Justin, I'm so scared. I watched them cuddling together, and some fragments in my memory slowly overlapped. There are few coincidences in life. Most of them are premeditated sins. Those were fragments that once made me feel extremely painful. After Justin returned to China, I quickly resigned and helped him set up a hospital. The days in the early stage of starting a business were very hard and difficult. Justin was busy building connections and buying land, and I also helped him sort out materials and negotiate with various real estate companies, as well as raise funds from various banks and institutions. Grace, who had just graduated from university at that time, didn't even dare to speak loudly. She knew nothing about business. Unlike Justin, who had been influenced by his family business since childhood, she had to learn everything from scratch. But for Justin, she was willing to endure these hardships. Justin's family was a medical family. Justin's great-grandmother, Ji Ying, was a famous gynecological expert with a great reputation during the Republic of China period. However, what Justin's family founded was a pharmaceutical company. The main controlling shareholder of the company now is Justin's grandfather, who has two sons, Justin's eldest uncle and father. As expected, Justin's eldest uncle will inherit most of the shares, since it was foreseeable that Justin couldn't participate in the family business in the future. He then set his sights on a private hospital. Justin told me that his father and eldest uncle supported his plan very much. He said that his eldest uncle's children were good for nothing. If he could achieve something, he would surely be highly regarded by the elders. I don't care about inheriting the property of my ancestors, Grace. He used to be so energetic and full of ambition. A truly capable person should build his own career. This was Justin's ideal. For the sake of his ideal, I was willing to sacrifice my own future. I got up early and went to bed late every day to read documents and run business. Finally, I helped Justin acquire the land and build the hospital building. I, who had become more and more proficient in business, even negotiated a decoration cooperation at a low price, saving a large amount of budget for Ji Ying Hospital. I called Justin tired but happily, wanting to tell him this good news. But a soft and charming female voice came from the other end of the phone. Hello? Her tone was rising. Justin brother is drunk. I'm taking care of him. I felt as if I had fallen into an ice cellar in an instant. Sometimes a woman's sixth sense is so terrifying. I just heard the voice and knew it was her. It was that Cindy, that so-called sister. Grace sister, don't think too much. She chuckled softly. As his girlfriend, why didn't you take good care of him? You should thank me. The phone was hung up. I froze in place for a few seconds and then I saw a photo sent to my phone. Justin was lying on the sofa in the hotel being held in the arms of a girl with a bright smile. She held up her phone to take a selfie showing a provocative smile. That was the first time I saw Cindy. Later when Justin came home, he swore that there was nothing between them. He said that he went to a social engagement, got drunk and lost consciousness. Sometimes he said, the Eagle River Group is the largest medical device company in Zhonghua. The hospital wants to cooperate with the group. I can't afford to offend them. Sometimes he said, my family elders are on good terms with Cindy's parents. I can't go against the elders' wishes. She's just a little girl who doesn't know any better. Don't take it to heart. I silently did the housework and then said, okay. Later I realized that everyone knew about Cindy's feelings for him except that Justin was pretending to be stupid. I think he might not have liked Cindy before. She was too spoiled and willful, not the kind of sensible girl that Justin liked. But that was the idea of student Justin. Only after entering society and going through the trials and tribulations in the process of starting a business could he realize the benefits of power and influence. Cindy was the little princess who matched him. And I, a Cinderella, was not worthy of the ambitious prince. I found more and more clues. Whether it was the fragrance of perfume on his coat when he came back from social engagements or the faint lipstick marks on his collar, they all showed that an irreparable rift had begun to appear between us. He said, "It's for business. In business, these things are inevitable." As Jing Hospital was gradually established, he came home less and less often. And when he was at home, he typed on his phone more and more often, with an ambiguous smile on his face. He said, "These are all work-related matters, Grace. Don't think too much." Grace used to be a complete fool. She smiled and said she wouldn't think too much and then kept everything in her heart until the day when she couldn't hold it in anymore. That day was the inauguration ceremony of Jing Hospital. Justin, as the founder and the first dean, and Cindy, the representative of the investor Eagle River Group, attended together. Before the ribbon-cutting ceremony, they stood side by side, hand in hand, looking like a perfect couple in front of the media cameras. Justin's face was full of high spirits, and Cindy was smiling brightly, and I, who had just got engaged to Justin not long ago, stood in an empty corner, like a complete joke. They were cuddling together like this back then. It turned out that they had always been together, whether at the peak of success or in the trough of being jailed. And I was the redundant one from the beginning to the end. All right, if I keep reminiscing, it won't be polite to my blood pressure. The past has dissipated like smoke in my mind. In front of me, one of the two people looked exhausted, and the other was in tears. I'm really speechless. "I've met a man like you who can't understand what others say," I said to Justin and then turned to the police. "I've said that I won't forgive. That's it, right? I won't sign the letter of understanding, Grace." Justin grabbed me at once. "You've changed. How come you've become so unreasonable?" I took a deep breath and silently recited to myself that taking care of my breast starts with me. When encountering problems, don't exhaust myself internally but exhaust others externally. So I slapped Justin backhandedly. A crisp slap sound rang out in the mediation room. Justin was stunned on the spot. I shouted at him in distress, "You've changed, Justin. I've already said that I won't forgive. Why are you being so unreasonable?" Cindy was also stunned for a moment and then rushed towards me. "How could you hit brother Justin?" I pretended to fall to the ground, thinking in my mind whether to pick up a BMW or a Mercedes tomorrow. Just as Cindy was about to pull me, a clear and sharp angry shout suddenly came from the entrance of the police station. "Cindy!" The ferocious-looking Cindy suddenly trembled and shrank to one side. I wasn't prepared and almost fell to the ground, but Justin quickly helped me in time. I looked at him in some surprise. The man at the entrance had already walked in. He walked straight up to me and bowed slightly. "Grace, my sister is so ignorant that she has made a big mistake. I sincerely apologize to you." He stood up. I looked at him and found that he was a man dressed in a suit and tie. His face was regular, but his jaw was thin. In his deep eye sockets were a pair of calm yet sharp eyes. For some reason, he looked somewhat familiar to me. Justin was supporting me, but his voice was a bit flustered. "Mason, I wonder if I could ask Grace to move to another place for a talk." He looked straight at me, with a very polite tone but revealing a sense of oppression that made people dare not refuse. I thought about it and pushed Justin away. "Sure, no problem." Justin, however, pulled me back. "Director Chi, this is a matter between me and my girlfriend. I'll persuade her to forgive." Mason raised his eyelids and glanced at him. "Are you a family member of the perpetrator?" Justin became even more flustered. "Unfortunately, you have nothing to do with my sister." His tone was flat, but there was some sharpness in his voice. "I'm the family member of the perpetrator. Whether to forgive or not should be discussed between me and Grace." "Mason, what's it to you?" Lana's angry voice rang out. "Oh, it's Aunt Han." Mason turned his head as if he had just noticed Lana. "Father is already very unhappy about the trouble my little sister has caused. If you could handle it well today, that would be okay, but obviously, you can't handle it well." He turned to me. "Grace, please follow me." I was about to follow him, but Justin pulled me back again. He whispered eagerly, "Grace, don't go with him. He's from the Chi family. Don't stop me, unless you can pay me the compensation. I pulled his hand down and Grace, be obedient. He stiffly tried to pull me back again. First it's, don't make trouble, and then it's, be obedient. Justin, do you think I'm your lapdog? I shook him off forcefully. I'm going to vent my anger for the female lead in those abusive novels today. Since the moment you left me to accompany Cindy, we've had nothing to do with each other. Do you hear me? You're nothing, and you're still here ordering me around. Get out of my way, you embarrassing thing. He looked at me in astonishment. I let out a long sigh and then turned around and walked away with big strides. Mason invited me to talk in a high-end coffee shop. We were in a private room on the 64th floor of the South Pearl building, overlooking the city and drinking Santa Helena coffee. I looked up and sized up the rich young master in front of me, Mason, one of the current directors of the Eagle River Group and also the well-known successor of the Chi family in Tan City. The old man of the Chi family had 3 children, and Mason was born to the second wife who was the least favored. In the past, this second young master had always been like a nobody, but a few years ago, he was suddenly promoted directly to the director level. At the same time, the former heir apparent, Channing, was suddenly removed from the position of heir by old Master Chi for unknown reasons. From this point of view, this young master's strength should not be underestimated, but why did I always feel that I had seen him before? Firstly, I have to apologize to you again, Miss Grace. He lowered his head, with sincere words. Cindy has been poorly disciplined and has a naughty temperament. As her elder brother, I have an inescapable responsibility. I tasted the coffee. It was very bitter. You're easier to talk to than them, Mr. Chi. He remained calm. What do you mean by that? You're reasonable and don't shirk responsibility. I put down the coffee cup. At least in the 2 months since the car accident happened, you're the only one who has said the word apology to me. He smiled apologetically. My sister is really too ignorant. Actually, she doesn't have full capacity for civil conduct. She has some mental problems. Oh, she's crazy. But it doesn't matter. I'll be even crazier. I'll let him see it in a while. I nodded. I understand these. Mr. Chi also hopes that I'll sign the letter of understanding, right? Yes. His voice still carried an apologetic tone. Anyway, Cindy is my sister and my father's daughter. If she goes to prison, the Eagle River Group will be affected one way or another. I'm a businessman and I have to avoid things that damage the corporate image as much as possible. I don't know what Grace's requirements for compensation are. Mr. Chi, are you a director of the Eagle River Group? I chose my words carefully, preparing to ask for a large sum. He looked a bit surprised. Yes. I want shares. I took a sip of coffee and almost made Mason spill his coffee. He steadied himself and looked at me. Shares? Yes, shares, I said with a smile. To be honest, because of this car accident I lost my fiancé and my job. I'm in great need of money. The Eagle River Group isn't fully controlled by your Chi family and there are other shareholders. Mr. Chi, you might as well give me a little bit and I'll leave with my meal ticket and won't interfere in your sister's affairs anymore. I was calculating carefully in my mind. The Eagle River Group is thriving even if I'm given 0% of the shares. The annual dividends will be enough for me to live a comfortable life. If he refuses to agree, it's also feasible for me to take the opportunity to ask for more compensation anyway. Cindy has wronged me first. It's not easy for me to meet such a wealthy person. I won't let him off easily without getting hundreds of thousands or even millions from him today. Mason lowered his head and thought for a long time. After a while, he suddenly raised his head and stared fixedly at me. Grace, is this what you really want? I felt a bit uneasy under his gaze. President Mason, don't misunderstand me. I'm an easygoing person. If you think it's difficult, you can convert the shares into cash for me too. It's impossible to give it to you directly, but I have another way. He shifted his gaze and slowly turned to the vase decorating the table. Let's hear it? I was confused and looked at him suspiciously. Unexpectedly, Mason quickly pulled out the roses from the vase and suddenly held them in front of me. Grace, marry me. Me? The roses? The passing waiter? What's going on? Has the overbearing president gone crazy too? Norma, don't you believe me? I'm really the female lead in an abusive novel, and I'm the kind who's about to turn black and slap the supporting male lead in the face. I kept chattering on the phone, and the affectionate second male lead isn't your old classmate Dr. Gao but Justin's prospective brother-in-law, the young master and major director of the Eagle River Group, Mason. I got more and more excited and twisted on the bed like a worm. Look at this setup. He's a standard Mary Sue novel male lead who has been secretly in love with the female lead for a long time and has been silently protecting her. Finally, when the female lead is abandoned by the scumbag, he's determined to guard by her side regardless of everything. Grace, what are you talking about? Calm down. Norma shouted on the other end of the phone. I'm really not lying to you, sister. Just now it was this golden boy I told you about who proposed to me. I hurriedly took a deep breath and almost choked myself, and cough cough cough. I agreed. What? Who proposed to you? What's going on? Norma's chaotic questions came from the receiver. He said that he had actually known me since we were 8 years old. He had noticed me long ago. He had always been reluctant to have a marriage alliance with a wealthy family and resisted the blind dates arranged by his father. But after seeing me, he suddenly wanted me to be his wife. I'm so excited, I said. Oh my God, my own CP is so sweet to ship. Just now, in the coffee shop, the roses in hand, Mason completed a 3-minute-long stare. Do I know you, Mr. Chi? I looked at him affectionately. Or rather, do you know me? I've known you for a long time, since we were 8 years old. He braced himself to stare affectionately back at me. At the first investment conference of the Eagle River Group in Jinhong beside President James, it was you. My smile froze. Jinhong Media is a newly emerging media giant in Tan City. However, few people know that James, the founder of Jinhong Media, is my father. When I was 8 years old, that was before I was abandoned by the James family. I know that a lot of things have happened to your family in these years, and you just had a car accident and can't remember many things clearly. Mason stared at the roses, and his tone was still as calm as that of a president. But I hope you'll trust me this time. Now I have the ability to decide my own marriage, and I also need you to stand by my side. Don't you want shares? Marry me, and then my shares will be our joint property during the marriage. Don't sign a prenuptial agreement? I blurted out a few words. No need. There are many implications in marrying me. If you consider divorce, it won't be that easy. He still stared at the roses, speaking in a cold tone as if he were discussing business, but his earlobes started to turn red. And Grace, maybe I know what kind of person you are better than you do now. President Mason, maybe you knew the old Grace, but thanks to your sister, the current me is quite different from before. I tactfully reminded him, maybe you. I can sense that, but I believe that a person's essence doesn't change that easily. Mason's tone still carried an air of inescapable oppression, but his earlobes were getting redder. You need money, and I need you, to be a good Mrs. Chi. That's it. If you marry me, I can't guarantee anything else, but you'll definitely have a lot of money that you want. This sentence moved me. On impulse, I took the roses. Okay, I agree. Mason was stunned for a moment, and then he seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as he withdrew his hand. Okay, thank you, thank you. Me, what are you thanking for? I'll arrange the rest of the matters. He quickly got up and seemed to be running away. Grace, I'll contact you again. Farewell. Hey, do you know my contact information? I was really confused. I know it. He threw out this sentence and fled as if his life depended on it. He even forgot to pay the bill. That's what happened. I finished telling the story as if I had just run a long distance. I thought he was a domineering CEO, but it turns out he's even crazier than me. You don't know. After he left, I was just standing there in a daze. I saw the waiters around were all excited. Their faces full of gossip were even more interesting than shadow puppetry. And do you know how much 2 cups of Santa Helena coffee cost? 560 yuan. What on earth are you doing, Grace? I haven't found a job yet. How come you're getting involved with another man again? Norma roared on the other end of the phone. I didn't do it on purpose. The capitalist proposed to me, sis. Who could refuse? He's like a golden mountain standing there, glittering. Well, I know that he might not really marry me, but being a fiancé for a while won't cost me anything. And I can also get a lot of benefits from it. Oh, sis, wait a moment. Someone's calling me. I switched the call and the voice from the daytime came through the receiver. The tone was still calm and low and the content was still outrageous and shocking. This is Mason. Are you ready, Grace? I'll pick you up tomorrow morning to get the marriage certificate. The media in Tan City went wild. The young master of Ingjiang, the #1 eligible bachelor in Tan City, suddenly got married. There was no dating, no betrothal gifts, and none of the drama that people liked to see where the parents-in-law made things difficult for the new daughter-in-law. They got the marriage certificate at lightning speed. And he married the victim of the car accident caused by the little princess of Ingjiang. I was sitting in a 500 square meter flat and swiping my phone. Look. Everyone's talking about it like crazy. Things like, the mysterious heiress returns to the country for marriage, the rumors of the Chi family's incest, childhood sweethearts can't beat the newcomer. What nonsense. Mason was expressionlessly directing his assistants to bring the furniture into the house. I don't have a childhood sweetheart. But in all kinds of rumors, there are dozens or even hundreds of heiresses who are said to have been engaged to you since childhood. I took out the news and put it in front of his face. In all kinds of entertainment articles about taking stock of young Master Chi's love history, there were various Miss Lees, princess shows, and Miss Moss, with pictures that were photoshopped messily. You could tell that everyone had been having a great time gossiping about these over the years, and the most popular couple among them was with the little princess of Jinhong Media, Stella. I took a light breath and felt a slight stinging pain in the place where I was hit. That's right, Stella was exactly my father's younger daughter, my half-sister. I hadn't seen them, father and daughter, for many years. So-called relatives? Stella, she's much younger than me. Mason gave a bitter smile. I don't know if I heard it wrong, but there was a hint of caution in his tone. Besides, for so many years, I've only been interested in you. Oh, his mouth was as sweet as honey. I blushed. Thank you, President Mason. I love you too. Cough, let's not talk about this. I didn't expect Mason to be so shy. His face had already turned red up to his ears. Now that my father and my stepmother already know about our marriage, we still have to go back and let them meet you. Of course. Now you and I are in the same boat. I was counting the balance in my account and couldn't stop smiling. Although I haven't received any training in wealthy families, I still accompanied Justin to start a business anyway. If there's anything you need me to do, even if it means going through fire and water, speak of the devil. I saw Justin's incoming call on my phone and my smile gradually disappeared. Mason reached out his hand to me. Do you want me to talk to him? No, President Mason. I can handle this little matter myself. I nodded and bowed and answered the call. Grace, what's going on with the news? There was a suppressed roar from Justin on the other end. How rude. Justin, you should call me sister-in-law. I put on airs. What are you messing around with? You really married Mason? It's absolutely true, and I'm not cheating anyone. Do you have anything else to ask? I could hear Justin's heavy breathing on the other end under the shock. He seemed completely stunned. Grace, you're crazy. Do you know what you're talking about? Mason is a director of Ingjiang and the future heir. Don't you even look at who you are. So noisy. I walked around the spacious living room with my phone and came to the kitchen. Then I threw the phone into the stew pot, covered the pot, and banged on it with a ladle randomly. I opened the lid and the other end had already hung up. I winked at the bewildered Mason. Honey, let's go. Hello everyone. This is President Mason and his little wife, Ba. It's driver Shen and her little husband. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have thought that the noble young Master Chi couldn't drive. So I had to drive Mason's McLaren for him. Holding the steering wheel, I felt like a liberated serf singing a song. I couldn't help laughing when I thought that I, Grace, had such a day. Mason was sending text messages in the passenger seat. Hearing me laugh, he turned his head and looked at me. I looked at him and saw him smile. "Why are you so happy?" "I've hooked up with a rich guy." "How could I not be happy?" I said cheerfully. It was rare to see an expression on Mason's face. "As long as you're happy, I feel that I haven't done anything wrong." I was stunned for a moment. "Really? President Mason, what kind of relationship do we actually have? Could it be that I'm really the first love of some hidden big shot?" In the second half of the novel, is the tragic heroine about to take off? Mason seemed a bit embarrassed. "Just think of it as the kind of relationship where we fell in love at first sight." As soon as he finished speaking, a black Mercedes suddenly darted out from the side and cut right in front of us. I was startled and slammed on the brakes. Luckily, our seat belts didn't break. The door of the black car opened and I saw an angry Justin getting out. He was dressed in a suit and tie as if he was about to attend a meeting, but he was clearly furious and his tie was crooked. "Grace, get out of the car!" he roared at me. "Damn it, Justin. I was so focused on braking that I forgot to run you over." I was extremely angry and yanked off my seat belt. "What a despicable thing you are. How did you learn the traffic rules?" Mason got up and stopped me. "Grace, I'll go. Don't worry. He can't do anything to me." I was still fuming. "I'm just afraid that you'll kill him. Then the news will be, the new daughter-in-law of the Chi family kills her ex-boyfriend in the street." Mason's voice was still calm. This made me feel a bit embarrassed. In just a short while Mason had already got out of the car. Justin couldn't help being stunned either. "Grace is driving? This is her car. It's already been transferred to her name." Mason had a cold face. "Justin, do you have anything to say to my wife?" "My wife?" Justin laughed angrily. "Grace is my fiancée." "Who the hell is still your fiancée? If you're not in your right mind, go and see a doctor for brain problems. Don't bark like a dog on the road." I was so angry that I opened the window and shouted outside. "Oh, really?" Mason remained calm. "Then I wonder what Justin's attitude towards my sister is." This left Justin speechless. He looked both angry and embarrassed. "Cindy? Cindy is my sister." "Sorry, Cindy only has me as her brother, not you." Mason slightly curled the corner of his mouth. "If she knows that you stopped us today, there will surely be a big fuss. I don't know how my father and Aunt Han will react if my sister's condition gets worse because of you." These words hit Justin's sore spot. His arrogance subsided a lot, but he was still very reluctant. "Mason, are you that desperate for a wife? Do you know what kind of person you've married? Whether I'm a good person or not is another matter. What right does a piece of rotten vegetable leaf who has been cheating for 8 years have to talk about others?" I was so angry that I felt like my head was going to explode. "I almost lost my life because of your illegal driving. What do you think you are? The black and white impermanence? I know what kind of person Grace is better than you do." Mason frowned slightly. "As for you, maybe you want to go to the detention center to keep Cindy company. It's a pity that Cindy has been bailed out. I don't know if the Justin family is willing to bail you out." Justin's face showed a hint of panic, and then we saw the traffic police coming in a hurry. The leader nodded to Mason. "President Mason, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Captain Lee. Thank you for your hard work," Mason said, and then got back into the car and said to me, "Let's go." I watched the traffic police handcuff Justin to the window of the car, gave Justin the middle finger and then reversed the car and drove away. I didn't expect that the Chi family would hold a gala tonight to welcome me. Not only did the whole Chi family show up, but also all the ladies, gentlemen, young masters and young ladies of the upper class in Tan City. All dressed up and came to this villa located in the city center, making me, the new daughter-in-law, in jeans and a windbreaker, not know where to put my hands. Wow, there are so many people. I looked around and gave Mason an awkward but polite smile. Mason's hand beside him was trembling. I was wondering about it when I heard him muttering to himself, "They said it was a private tea party. You. He noticed my gaze, seemed to force himself to hold back, then turned his head and looked at me worriedly. "They didn't inform me in advance. Grace, if you feel uncomfortable, don't force yourself. Let's go back." I was stunned for a moment. Some distant memories seemed to rush over suddenly and flood into my mind in a hurry. When I was a child, James also took me to various upper-class parties. But I don't know what was wrong with me. I would always have shortness of breath and couldn't move at all when I was in such occasions. James was very disappointed in me because of this, and then he turned to cultivate Stella, who was as noble and lovely as a doll and was born by his second wife. Even when I grew up, this problem of mine hadn't been completely cured. Justin had looked down on me more than once and even didn't allow me to appear in public with him. This also made me, his fiancée, invisible in front of the media and unnoticed. But now, after being hit by a car, I seem to have awakened a lot of different talents, such as being extremely good at socializing. Right in front of us, Lana, wearing a dress, was standing sideways. Her slender hands in white gloves gently stroked the back of the old master of the Chi family. She cast a sidelong glance as if cutting us with a knife. Then, as if giving an order, a gorgeously dressed woman beside her rushed towards Mason with a look of surprise on her face. "Mason?" I heard a loud female voice. I saw that pretty young lady carrying champagne. Although she was trotting, she still walked gracefully. I looked her up and down. Perhaps she was one of Mason's rumored fiancés, but I had been out of touch with the upper class for a long time and couldn't remember who she was at all. "Mason, long time no see," she greeted loudly. She sounded more like a soprano singer than a young lady from a wealthy family. "The last time I saw you was on the Gold Coast of the Maldives. I remember you liked the beach cocktails there. I wonder if you'd like to go there again this summer?" I originally wanted to watch the show, but Mason's face looked extremely ugly tonight, which made me couldn't help worrying about his state. When the boss isn't happy, as his subordinate, I should be more perceptive. I smiled at the girl and said, "He's not going." The pretty young lady couldn't keep her composure. "I'm asking Mason." "He's already answered." "His answer is silence." I still kept smiling. She ignored me and smiled brightly at Mason. "Mason, my dress is a new haute couture from the spring fashion show. You once said that I looked good in this style. How do I look in it?" I said, "It's nice. Can I borrow it and wear it?" "The pretty young lady, ? I grabbed her, my eyes shining. "I'll wash it clean and send it back to you after wearing it. How about that?" The young lady had an offended look on her face. "Borrow? Wash? What are you talking about? Good things should be shared willingly. That's what we learned in kindergarten." I held on to her and wouldn't let go. "Sister, look at how casually I'm dressed today. What's wrong with you helping me out? You. How can there be someone like you?" She looked terrified. She looked up and saw Mason staring at Lana with an indifferent look, and then she quickly ran away. "I don't know her." Mason's expression was particularly bad. "Lana brought her here to smear my reputation." I took another look at his face. Stepmothers aren't always bad, but in wealthy families, with so many conflicts of interest, most stepmothers play such roles. Just like when I was driven out of the family, it was largely thanks to James' second wife. Mason usually didn't show his emotions and always looked like an overbearing CEO. But today's Mason was like a boiling kettle with the sound muted, secretly steaming. "Shall we go to see your father and stepmother?" I asked. "Today is the anniversary of my mother's death." Mason clenched his fists and the veins on his hands bulged. "Even if they've always ignored her, they shouldn't do this today, on today." I was stunned for a moment. So that's how it was. Holding this dinner tonight by the Chi family was no different from popping champagne on Mason's mother's grave. Who could bear that? All along, I've been enduring. I know that the weak can't compete with the strong. I patted him on the shoulder and advised him, "The more you endure, the angrier you'll get. If you take a step back, you'll fall into the abyss. Everyone should be responsible for their own blood pressure and health. Besides, enduring might not necessarily work." Suddenly, I felt a stabbing pain in my forehead like being pricked by a needle. I covered my head and bent down, and suddenly a memory from many years ago emerged. Enduring indeed didn't work. When I was a child, I endured. And then what? Wasn't I still kicked out of the James family by that old bastard James? The combination of my parents was a mistake. James and his media group were new stars in Tan City, before he started his business, he met my mother on a blind date, got married naturally, and gave birth to me. If James had been an ordinary person, maybe they could have respected each other all their lives. However, he started his business and it began to thrive. With money in hand, there were all kinds of more beautiful and capable women around James. Then came suspicion, quarrels, and throwing things around. My childhood was spent in chaos, until James thought that my mother was useless, so he set up a scheme to divorce her. My mother didn't get a penny of property, lost my custody, and didn't even have the chance to visit me. She got breast cancer out of anger and depression and passed away. I lost my mother's love when I was a child and grew up in the cold environment of the James family. James habitually ignored me but expected me to suddenly become a talented child that he hoped for. I couldn't do it. Irises can't bloom in the desert. Children lacking love will become timid and cowardly. Grace wasn't born with extraordinary talents. She was dull and introverted, which made James very disappointed. Naturally, he turned his attention to Stella. Stella was a little princess surrounded by everyone's love. She grew up during the glorious rise of Gene Hong media and was deeply loved, smart, and lively. As for me, I was sent to a boarding school when I was a teenager. I could only return to the James family during the Spring Festival and other holidays throughout the year. My relationship with Stella was neither good nor bad, and my relationship with James was neither bad nor good. Such a completely ignored life lasted until I graduated from high school. James arranged a business marriage for me. To put it nicely, it was to go abroad with a young master to cultivate feelings. In fact, it was to follow him around like a nanny, humbly waiting to get married after graduation and become a full-time wife and mother. Hey, if I had listened to him, Grace would have become the heroine of another tragic story. Grace rebelled against her father for the first time and said some harsh words. Then I got a loud slap and was ordered to pack my things and get out of the house. This was the process of my being driven out of the James family. Family affection is such a thing, absurd and ridiculous. 18-year-old Grace walked out of the house in a mess and was cut off from financial resources ever since. Fortunately, Grace still had an uncle on her mother's side. This relative saved Grace's life. Later, when my uncle and aunt passed away, Grace and her cousin Norma were just like sisters and had supported each other until now. I closed my eyes. If it hadn't been for losing my mother at a young age, Grace wouldn't have developed a meek temper like a bun. If it hadn't been for being inferior and lacking love, she wouldn't have wasted 8 years on a scumbag, being repeatedly betrayed and used, and never dared to think of leaving him. From the very beginning, Grace's life was completely ruined by her so-called relatives. Mason and I looked at each other. I know, Grace. Your mother. I took a light breath. Don't say it. Have you remembered everything? Mason took me to a corner of the banquet and picked up a glass of water and handed it to me. I've said it before, Grace. We are the same kind of people. I felt a bit strange and looked at his face. The anger on Mason's face hadn't completely faded away, but in his eyes, there seemed to be a faint hint of excitement. Both you and I are people abandoned by our families. I was stunned for a moment and managed to force a smile. Are you kidding, young Master Chi? When were you ever abandoned? When I was a child. Just like you. Mason pulled me in front of him and put his right arm around my shoulder. I moved my body a bit uncomfortably and felt a bit of hot breath on top of my head. When I was a child, I was even worse off than a dog they raised. He pulled me a bit closer in an ambiguous way and pointed with his left hand at a person in another corner of the banquet hall. Do you see that? That's my elder brother Channing. I followed his gaze. A man in a suit and tie was standing there with an outstanding temperament and noble manners. His flamboyant aura made it seem as if he was the master of this family. There was another girl beside him. She had her back to me, so I couldn't see what she looked like. My elder brother's mother was a real wealthy young lady. Her abilities can't be compared with Lana's. Mason whispered in my ear. He was brought down because my father suddenly found out that he wasn't his biological son. Really? Is it true? My eyes widened. My father was a habitual cheater. He didn't have a pleasant relationship with his first wife at first. But the old man didn't expect that she would dare to cuckold him secretly. Mason chuckled, seeming to feel a bit of satisfaction. If my mother could have done the same, she wouldn't have died in a car accident in a trance when she found out that the old man was cheating on her with Lana. I was shocked. I didn't expect such a thing to have happened in the Chi family. The old man thought it was shameful that my mother died in a car accident and even disliked me because of it. At that time, Channing was still highly regarded. Lana quickly took over and gave birth to Cindy. I was caught in the middle and was bullied by them in every possible way. At that time, I thought, it would be better to die. There was a hint of relief in his voice. I looked up worriedly but met his somewhat doting smile. It was at that time that I met you. It happened when James was trying to curry favor with my father. I saw little you following him, with your head down, looking timid and cowardly. You were like a puppy. Who are you calling a dog? I glared at him. I was just about to refute when I thought that I was really no different from a dog at that time. We were both living a miserable life, pitifully begging for a few mouthfuls of cold food. Grace, you might not understand how I felt at that time. But for me, that was the first time I knew that I wasn't the only one living this kind of life. You seem to be my real family, just like finding someone of the same kind. Alright, we're all like dogs, huh? I was a bit uncomfortable being held by him and wanted to push him away. Mason reluctantly let me go. He still wanted to say something, but suddenly I saw the female companion beside Channing in the distance turn around. I was stunned. Wasn't that Stella? I stared blankly at the young girl walking gracefully towards me. Since Stella was born, she had been a princess. She was born with expectations and surrounded by all the beautiful wishes, just like she was now wearing a dress and looking as beautiful as a fairy descending to the mortal world. She looked at me, her eyes flickering, and affectionately said, "Sister." I replied with an and looked blankly at the man beside her. "Calling me sister is too formal, Stella. I should call you sister-in-law instead." The expressions of both of them turned ugly at the same time. Mason tightened his grip on my hand beside me. Stella was quite a bit younger than me. Calculating her age, she should have just graduated from university. I wondered what it meant for her to be with Channing. Of course it was impossible for Channing to get involved in the Chi family's business now. But for the sake of Cindy's father's face, which was more important than anything else, outsiders couldn't possibly know this secret. He teamed up with Jin Hong Media, probably to find support for himself. This was probably also what James intended. However, when he found out that his eldest daughter, who had been driven out of the family and became an outcast, had actually become Mason's wife, in the face of the inevitable war between the two brothers, which side would this old guy bet on? "Sister, I haven't seen you for many years. You've suffered a lot during these years." Stella blinked, her eyes seeming to have tears in them, but more of it was a sense of inquiry. "You and Dad shouldn't have had such a big feud. As if I had a choice back then." I looked up and saw the guests around us gathering around. I was wondering what was so interesting about these few words when I accidentally caught a glimpse of Lana in the distance, frowning and shooting a cold glare at me. I thought to myself that something was wrong. Sure enough, I heard Channing say loudly, "Sister-in-law, although you had an improper affair and fell out with your family back then, Uncle Shen was just angry for a moment. There's no feud between father and daughter that can't be resolved overnight. Now that you're newly married, and little sister has come to make peace, you shouldn't always be angry with your father." I didn't expect him to say such a thing. Looking around, sure enough, these socialites began to whisper among themselves. Stella timely had her eyes turn red and held my hand. "Sister, it was all my fault back then. I should have persuaded you to admit your mistake to father. Who knew you had such a bad temper? But now that you've found a good husband, you should have let go of that man long ago. Sister, come home with me." I heard more and more people gathering around, and someone whispered, "The new madam is actually the daughter of the James family. She must have done something shameful and was driven out of the family. How could such a person marry into the Chi family? The second young master must be so blinded by beauty that he lost his mind. But I don't think she's that good looking either." I thought about it. The reason why I was driven out back then was indeed related to a man. I'm afraid Stella dared to slander me because she had done enough homework beforehand. I could understand why Channing did this, but I couldn't figure out what benefits James could get from smearing me. Did he really hate me that much? Or did he realize that he couldn't be my father anymore, so he simply wanted to completely break off relations? I raised my hand to stop Mason, who was about to speak. When a person is wrongly accused, it's very easy to fall into the trap of self-justification. But since the opponent was well prepared, it wouldn't be easy to defend myself for a while. A good person is most afraid of being slandered, but unfortunately I'm not a good person. If we're going to die, we'll all die together. No one should expect to have an easy time. No, 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 it's all my fault. I raised my voice. Stella, I know you're angry with me, but when I snatched your boyfriend, I didn't mean to harm you. Stella's face changed drastically. You were only in junior high school at that time. What was a good little girl like you doing having a puppy love? And with a man in his 20s? As your older sister, I tried to persuade you and even scolded you. Having no other way, I had to take this drastic measure. I was talking nonsense, and the more I talked, the more excited I became. As a result, you hated me like crazy. Well, I understand. After all, kids can be stubborn sometimes. But you shouldn't have instigated the old guy, father, to drive me out. I didn't even have the tuition for university, and life was really hard. Mason, Channing, and Stella were all dumbfounded. I looked at everyone and they all had the expression of being stuffed with a big piece of gossip. Now that you've found a proper boyfriend, well, you two look so well matched. I'm really happy for you, sister. There's no feud between family members that can't be resolved overnight. Since you've invited me personally, I won't hold it against you. When will you invite me home? I looked at them with a smile. Stella, you? What she said? Channing slowly turned to Stella. What? She's lying. I didn't have a puppy love. It was sister. Stella's face turned red and she was almost crying. It's my fault. I shouldn't have brought this up. I quickly added fuel to the fire and stopped Channing. No one outside our family knows about this. It's not a big deal. Why are you fussing about it? I didn't. Stella was on the verge of crying. Brother-in-law, don't be impatient. No matter how much Stella loved that man back then, now she's all about you. Who hasn't been confused when they were young? As a man, you should be more responsible. I patted Channing on the shoulder. What are you looking at? Scram. Haven't you seen a young couple having a quarrel? I shouted at the crowd. The banquet is about to start. Please take your seats. Mason cooperated with me in time to drive the people away. The people left reluctantly. In the corner, Stella and Channing were almost quarreling. Mason pulled me and walked quickly towards the door. I chased after him and asked, "Today we were supposed to meet the elders, but where's your father? Why did we only see Cindy's mother?" Mason didn't look back. He probably didn't come at all. Lana won't let it go easily. Let's go quickly. I followed him and walked hurriedly to the gate. Suddenly the gate opened wide and a figure rushed in. Grace. Come out here. Isn't this Justin? I hadn't seen him for just a few hours and he had become like this? Mason immediately stood in front of me to block Justin's sight. For a moment everyone in the banquet hall was looking towards the door. I looked into the distance and saw only Lana standing there with a calm expression. I was puzzled. Justin had just been taken away by the traffic police a few hours ago. Judging from the efficiency, it was impossible for him to be released so soon. And rather surprisingly, he was now drunk and reeked of alcohol. I didn't know if he had been drinking before. If he had been drinking and then drove drunk and dangerously, there was no way he should be allowed to make a scene here. Justin was still shouting loudly, "Grace, you slutty and fickle bitch. Come out here. He's probably brought here by Lana. She was able to stop us this afternoon because she got the news." Mason whispered to me, "Don't attract attention. Let's go quickly." I was about to run towards the side door when I heard Stella shout loudly, "Sister Grace. Do you know this person?" She really had to bring up the most inconvenient topic, didn't she? The drunk and crazy Justin rushed towards me. I looked at these upper-class bastards who were whispering among themselves and then at Lana, who was looking on with an air of calm, and I decided to make a big scene. Justin grabbed the collar of my windbreaker. "Grace, you actually got married looking all proper. How dare you betray me? I've been played for a fool by you for 8 years. You can't just treat me like nobody." I took off my windbreaker and slid under the nearest banquet table like a baseball player sliding into base. Everyone stared in amazement as they watched my knees slide on the smooth marble floor. Then I crawled out from under the table and flipped up to stand. Dr. Gao's rehabilitation training really worked well. I thought to myself. Come back here. Justin looked like he was about to commit domestic violence. No, he looked like he was about to intentionally hurt someone as he chased after me relentlessly. I grabbed a piece of pastry and threw it at him, hitting his head with cream. Mason caught Justin from behind and punched him hard on the head. I cheered and took advantage of Lana's stunned moment to rush to her side in 2 or 3 steps and grabbed her by the collar. "Are you crazy, Auntie? He's Cindy's fiancé. Do you still want your daughter to get married?" The onlookers below exploded with excitement. Although the news about Justin and Cindy wasn't new, most people didn't really know this small character like Justin. They had only heard about it. Now that I revealed his identity and added the exaggerated title of fiancé, it really sparked the gossipy hearts of these people. "What are you talking about? He's your fiancé." Lana struggled to break free from my hand, but I held it tightly and she couldn't break free. How dare I snatch a man from Princess Cindy? I turned to look at Justin, who had become a bit sober after being splashed with a cocktail by Mason. "When your daughter hit me with her car, wasn't he accompanying Cindy at the police station? How could he be related to me?" The discussion among everyone grew louder. Lana didn't expect me to be so persistent and was so angry that she couldn't say a word. Unexpectedly, Stella's shout came from the side again. "Sister, this man was your former fiancé. Although you're married to young Master Chi now, you can't deny your old love." Immediately some ladies who had heard some rumors started pointing fingers at me, and the content was nothing more than that I was a gold digger, a materialistic person, and despised the poor and favored the rich, and so on. "I didn't even know you before I got married. But you seem to know my fiancé. Well, let's ask the person himself. Justin, are you my fiancé or Cindy's fiancé? Think carefully before answering. Be careful that Cindy will skin you alive." Mason threw the wet and dirty Justin on the ground and shook his hands in disgust. Justin was half dazed and half sober, but when he heard Cindy's name he still shuddered. "I'm Cindy's?" "That's it then. Aunt Han, why are you harming your daughter-in-law and son-in-law like this? If you look down on us, just say it directly. Why make such a scene?" I jumped onto the table beside me and pointed at Lana from the moral high ground. "Aunt Han, if you dislike my newlywed wife so much, there's no need to invite us here hypocritically. There's even less need to make it so unseemly and hard to end." Mason stared coldly at Lana. All the anger that had accumulated throughout the night burst out at this moment, and his eyes seemed to be filled with ice. "Why are you all blaming me? What does it have to do with me?" Lana became flustered. "Guards! Who let this drunkard in?" I jumped to Mason's side. He thoughtfully put my windbreaker on me and we were ready to run away. Passing by the disheveled Justin, I probably figured it out. Lana hated not only me and Mason but also Justin, who was licking Cindy's boots. She really didn't want them to get married. After all, Cindy was her only daughter. Even if she loved Justin to death, Justin's identity was really not good enough. Moreover, this man had caused her daughter to be labeled as a mistress and led to her poor mental condition and frequent illness. I'm afraid that Lana even blamed me and Justin for Cindy's deliberate act of hitting someone with her car and getting into trouble with the police. But why didn't Cindy's father care when Lana was trampling on Mason's face like this? Mason pulled me along quickly, looking furious. I grabbed his shoulder and whispered to him, "When I asked for compensation before, Lana only gave me 500,000 yuan. She didn't seem to be very well off. How could she make such a scene behind your father's back?" It was his instigation. Mason had his back to me, but I could tell that he was clenching his teeth. He had already investigated you thoroughly. Stella must have been invited by him. I didn't listen to him and refused to be controlled. My father had long wanted to teach me a lesson. He's a pervert. I didn't mince my words. Whose father would use half of the upper-class circle to humiliate his daughter-in-law on the anniversary of his wife's death just to teach his son a lesson? Mason didn't say anything. After walking out of the mansion, he suddenly crouched down in pain, burying his head in his arms. When I was little, although he ignored me, he would occasionally hold me in his arms and bring me gifts from abroad. On the day I received the admission letter from a prestigious school, he even said that I was his pride. We're father and son. In the past, he could still pretend to be a kind father and a filial son. Why is he treating me like this? I gently patted his shoulder. I understood that as an unfavored child who was pushed into a position of power and had done quite well over the years, Mason had definitely endured more than just what happened today. The past is the past, and now he's a pervert. I comforted him patiently. Don't look for fatherly love among the broken pieces. Expired candy is harmful. Take some blood pressure medicine. Mason chuckled softly and took a few deep breaths. After a while, he stood up and pulled me into his arms. I'm sorry, Grace. When I'm with you, I always can't control my emotions. I patted him. Let's get in the car and go home. Mason and I walked side by side towards the parking lot. Passing by the entrance of the banquet hall, I saw Justin being dragged out by the guards like a dog. This Justin is really pathetic. I pointed at him and laughed. I don't know what he was thinking. He came to make trouble just because Lana instigated him. How can he still mix in the upper-class circle like this? I really wish Cindy was here too. Mason sneered. Aunt Han hasn't made any progress over the years. This move really is a case of hurting oneself as much as the enemy. Suddenly, Mason's cell phone rang. He answered it and it seemed to be Mason's subordinate on the other end. President Mason, I have something to report to you. Mason raised an eyebrow. Grace, wait for me for a moment. I waited in the garden at the corner of the entrance to the banquet hall. Suddenly, I heard a soft cry behind me, Sister. I gasped and turned around. This little girl was really like a ghost that wouldn't go away. I raised an eyebrow and looked at Stella, who had been inseparable from Channing tonight. Stella was probably brought here by Cindy's father, but Channing might not be. Their being together was probably part of James's plan, and Channing surely wouldn't be willing to be left out, so he joined forces with Lana. Now she came to find me alone. I didn't know what she was up to. Sister, are you still angry with me? Stella looked at me innocently with her big wet eyes. Come home. After all, you're still a member of the James family. Don't call me sister, Stella. I said calmly. Did that old bastard send you here? Yes. It's Dad. Stella looked a bit embarrassed. Sister, you're still a member of the James family after all. Blood ties can't be severed. I raised an eyebrow. What do you want to say? Stella smiled gently. Let's be frank with each other, sister. The Chi brothers are having disputes. Why should we get involved? Only Dad's Jinhong Media is our family's business. My eyelids twitched. James really didn't even bother to pretend anymore. How shameless. What does Jinhong Media have to do with me? I gave a dry laugh. Dad knows that you worked at the Jiying Hospital in previous years. Sister, you're very capable. Dad hopes that you can secretly help Jinhong. Stella smiled. You want me to work for free? How cheeky. I replied coldly, you don't have a choice, sister. I know you have a cousin named Norma who also works in the media industry. What are you trying to say? I immediately became alert. Yingjiang has many businesses under its umbrella, but the media industry isn't one of them. Stella smiled. Norma is also an outstanding journalist. If she wants to develop in Tan City, who can do without Jinhong? But for a journalist, it's quite normal to have some accidents at work. I laughed. Threatening me with Norma was touching my bottom line. Over the years, James hadn't cared about me at all. If it weren't for Norma taking care of me, I would have died countless times. It's just that he didn't expect that I, a useless person, could hook up with Mason and suddenly have some value to him. What's all this talk about blood ties and family? In Stella's smug eyes, I smiled and said, Stella, I'm going to be blunt with you. When that old bastard dies, call me and I'll definitely come to pay my respects. After saying that, I turned around and left. I happened to run into Mason, who had finished his business. I quickly dragged him into the car. What's wrong? Who made you angry? Mason fastened his seat belt in the passenger seat. You and my evil father. I was really angry. These people who pretend to be decent, they abused their wives and ignored their children. Now they're all surrounded by beautiful wives and young children, living a life of luxury? Damn it, is there any justice? At first, I had planned to let go of everything. The former Grace chose to swallow all the pain and forgive everyone who had hurt her. But she died in a pitiful way, falling headfirst into a muddy flower bed, looking extremely embarrassed. Now even my only relative is being threatened. Why should I, a tragic heroine who has awakened, still endure this kind of humiliation? Now I've decided that revenge is a dish best served cold. I don't care anymore. I'm in a state of mind similar to Cindy's now, and I want to ruin them. One shouldn't live this life in vain. I started the Maybach. Even if I'm going to hell later, I'll go there with my head held high. Did Stella provoke you again? Mason glanced at my expression. I briefly told him what she had said. Mason smiled gently. He seemed to have regained his image of a refined and noble young master. She made a mistake. I had already noticed the gap in Ing Xiang's business and had been secretly preparing to start a news media business. I thought James would have gotten some news, but I didn't expect that he didn't know at all. That call just now was a progress report. I was overjoyed. My cousin Norma hasn't found a job yet. She's an excellent journalist. Could she, for her safety, it's okay. By the way, should I say, it's getting cold. It's time to bankrupt the James family? Mason smiled somewhat playfully. Thank you. That's exactly what I want. I pushed him into the passenger seat, stepped on the accelerator, and reversed the car in a spinning motion. Teach me how to bankrupt the James family. I want to do it myself. Don't underestimate any woman who is as fierce as an eagle. I, Grace, am also a proper top student after all. I worked hard with Justin at the Jing Hospital for so many years, and my work experience is no joke. Mason taught me various businesses himself, and I learned them all in no time. To avoid the attention of Cindy's father and Lana, I was arranged to be Mason's chief secretary. This position sounds like a personal maid, but in fact, it gave me a reasonable excuse to handle all kinds of confidential businesses and documents of Ing Jiang. Moreover, my only immediate superior was Mason, and I wasn't under the jurisdiction of anyone else. On my first day at work, I put on a dress, stockings, and high heels, and I just felt uncomfortable no matter how I looked. Mason walked past me and couldn't help bursting out laughing. I glared at him. How did you know my size? It fits so well. Mason coughed softly and lowered his head to hide his embarrassment. When you care about someone, you'll naturally pay attention to every aspect of her. The domineering CEO is really good at this. I walked to his desk with a smile, propped one hand on the desk, and put the other hand on his shoulder. President Mason, since it's like this, shall we talk about some adult topics? Mason was confused and looked a bit flustered when he met my gaze. What topics? I moved closer to him and my breath blew on his neck. The kind of topics between a president and a secretary. It's working time now. It's not appropriate. Let's wait until we go home tonight. Mason's face turned red up to his ears. What do you mean by going home? Work is an adult topic. I suddenly stood up straight and took out a stack of documents seriously. This is the logo I designed for the new media department. Please have a look, President Mason. I saw that he lowered his head in disappointment. Norma's job search had been very difficult. She knew about my family's situation and firmly refused to work for companies under Jinhong Media. Recently she found a small company and sure enough she was harassed when she started working there. Needless to say it was Stella's doing. Before Norma could call to complain to me, Mason called her first and invited her to take a management position in the new media company under Ingjiang. When Norma came to our new home for the first time, she was extremely cautious, afraid that Mason would disappear if she wasn't careful. You're really my brother-in-law? It's absolutely true. Sister, you can rest assured. I patted my chest to assure her. Norma shook her head as if in a dream. Can such great wealth really fall on us sisters? It wasn't until I showed her our marriage certificate and told her several times that Mason and I had known each other since we were young that she believed that I had really married Mason and that it wasn't a scam. She held my hand, crying and laughing at the same time. Grace, you must meet good people. It doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. You mustn't suffer anymore. After crying, she went to work and gave us a big surprise. Her professional ability was even better than we expected. In just a few months, your work in Ingjiang is really impressive. I sincerely praised her to Mason. Mason? Norma, well, President Mason, Grace has always liked to talk nonsense since she was a child. Please don't take it to heart. And my design ability, which had been neglected for years because of Justin, came in handy again. The new logo I designed for the media department was highly praised, so Mason entrusted me with designing the logos for several new brands under his company and started to promote them. These brands were originally supposed to be assigned to Cindy. On the day of the banquet, Lana probably didn't let her go considering her health condition. So I sent her the photos of Justin making a scene on the street and embarrassing himself in the banquet hall. I heard that my new cheap sister and her fiancé had a big fight and then she fell ill and was hospitalized. I'm not a villain. I'm just very happy to create some small twists and turns on Cindy and Justin's smooth and beloved life paths. Lana's only daughter was brought down by us and she was so angry that she almost fainted. But over the years she hadn't been able to get in touch with the core business of Ingjiang. She could only try to influence her husband while secretly teaming up with Channing to try to bring down Mason. How could we not have expected this? Old Mr. Chi was a bit swayed by her words, but he was shocked by a hot search headline and had a stroke on the spot and fell down. That was the news that Channing wasn't Cindy's father's biological son, which was released by Mason through his new media company. This is such a big scandal. I laughed and opened a bottle of champagne with Mason. My mother was killed in a car accident after being stimulated by the news that she was his mistress. Mason smiled and clinked glasses with me. Those who cheat will be cheated on. I finally vented my anger. We should also thank Dr. Gao. We'll invite him and Sister Norma to dinner later. I drank it all in one gulp. Speaking of this matter, Dr. Gao, Norma's old classmate and my former attending physician, was of great help. As one of the most promising young doctors in the medical field of Tan City, although he might not be able to access the case of Cindy's father, his doctoral supervisor could. So under the pretext of helping his teacher, Dr. Gao got to know about Cindy's father's physical condition. There is a high risk of stroke. As family members, you must pay close attention. He gave us meaningful instructions. Thank you, Dr. Gao. I'll definitely give you a 200 yuan red envelope when you marry my sister. I bowed and scraped. Norma blushed and hit me and I ran away with a smile. These two took advantage of accompanying me for rehabilitation training to meet each other every day, and their feelings grew rapidly. They thought I didn't notice. It made me have to do one more week of training. Once Cindy's father fell, the agency right of Eagle River fell into the hands of Mason, the major director. While the Stella-Lana Channing alliance was as anxious as ants on a hot pan, I took the opportunity to propose to deal with James. Go ahead. I should remind you that Jinhong Media has deep roots in Tan City and you may not be able to shake its foundation. Mason smiled at me. Grace, do I count as helping you a great deal? Yes, President Mason. I bowed and scraped again. Then how are you going to repay me? His smile was a bit ambiguous. I knelt down on one knee and clasped my fists. If you don't mind, I'm willing to regard you as my adoptive father. Mason, we're husband and wife. There's really no need for this. Norma poked her head out. What new kind of fun is this between you two? Ordinary people don't have golden fingers, but capitalists do. Holding on to the thigh of a capitalist, I'm like a paying player who has risen from level 0 to level 999, and it's easy for me to do some things. For example, starting from various news, I made the old man of the Chi family misunderstand that the news was released by Jin Hong Media. This caused a big stir. James had always been currying favor with the Chi family, but now he had stabbed Cindy's father in the back. Just when Stella was clinging to Channing, Cindy's father immediately thought that Jin Hong Media was going to rebel. I took the opportunity to buy out all the marketing accounts and news headlines. For a while rumors spread everywhere that James was dissatisfied that Stella had only climbed up to Channing, who had no real power, instead of the much talked about Mason, and was waiting for an opportunity to take revenge on Eagle River. Now James was sweating profusely. Of course, he also had some connections and almost found out that it was me who was plotting against him. This unyielding old father sent Stella to plead for mercy, and I simply sent him away with a "get lost." Taking advantage of the time when Jin Hong Media was seriously weakened, Jin Jiang Media, under Mason, also officially rose to prominence. The cake in Tan City wasn't big, but it was quite easy to divide. Although it couldn't achieve the satisfying ending like the bankruptcy of the James family, in those feel-good novels, cutting off half of his territory was enough to disgust James thoroughly. James hated me so much that his teeth itched. But at this time the connection he had with Channing and Lana didn't pay much attention to him anymore. In a desperate attempt he teamed up with Justin, who also hated me deeply. Justin was also stubborn. He personally accepted an interview as the dean of Jiang Hospital and smeared me a lot. Almost forgot about this guy. I smiled at Mason while looking at the news. Mason glanced at words like gold digger and Pangelian in the news and frowned. Some people need a more profound lesson. After all, James was also a capitalist. Compared with him, Justin, this young and inexperienced guy, seemed insignificant. Jiang Hospital was my painstaking effort, and a morally corrupt person like Justin didn't deserve to represent Jiang. Don't forget that he still had a criminal record. So we took two-pronged actions. While Mason manipulated the hospital's funds, Norma and I made a big splash in public opinion. I made public all the scandals of Justin and Cindy over the years, the old news of Cindy's mother's affair and her taking over as the mistress, and the truth that Cindy hit me with her car, and it stayed on the hot search for days and nights. Before long, Justin announced bankruptcy. Actually, I didn't smear them. I just told the truth about what they had done. I looked at Norma innocently. Come on, Grace. President Mason has already bought Jiang Hospital and put it under your name. You should be satisfied this time. Norma smiled and touched my hair. By the way, your father-in-law's condition is improving after treatment. You should be careful. There was a shiny wedding ring on her ring finger, which was put on by Dr. Gao when he proposed to her 2 days ago. So I'm still the matchmaker for you too. I wish you two a house full of children and grandchildren and good fortune like the vast sea. I touched the scar on my head from the car accident and snorted. Mason was taking care of Cindy's father's affairs. His condition wouldn't get any better. Lana became a person that everyone condemned, and Cindy was no better. The little princess who used to be in the spotlight had the fact that she suffered from mental illness exposed, and she went completely crazy. She cried and ran to Cindy's father saying that she wanted to kill Mason and me. As for how she got into the ward where Cindy's father was resting quietly and went crazy, you'd have to ask her brother and Dr. Gao. However, she didn't know that Cindy's father had just learned an even more infuriating news: Eagle River couldn't do without Mason anymore. He quietly gathered most of the shareholders under his command, and now Director Chi had more than half of the shares in his hands. Now the only person who could reverse this situation was Cindy's father, the chief director himself. But he couldn't even stand up on his own. Could he still manage the company? It was really big news that made the old man's blood pressure soar. So Cindy's father was very happy, and gave Cindy a hard slap in the face, which was her favorite way of being punished. With this slap, not only did Cindy go back to the mental hospital again, but Cindy's father also never got up from his hospital bed again. Of course, in doing all this, I also suffered a lot while hurting my enemies. Jin Hong Media wasn't weak either. The news that Mason's new wife was the daughter of James and Justin's former fiancé was all exposed, which made the people in Tan City gossip for several weeks and almost choked on it. So all of a sudden Cindy and Justin became the focus of public opinion. I understood James' plan. Decent people all cared about their reputations. In this way I would surely try my best to reduce the influence of public opinion and restrain my actions. But Grace was never a decent person. I was eager for more chaos. So I added fuel to the fire of public opinion. All the secrets of the James family and the Chi family were completely exposed, rubbing James' face in the dirt. I thought that perhaps for several years to come Grace would be a regular guest on the entertainment pages and would be dug out by self-media writers from time to stir up old news. How about calling it the drama queen of Tan City legend? I asked Mason. He just smiled at me and said that I should find a place to hide. I really should hide. Stella and Justin called home to beg me to show mercy and I hung up on them all. However, calls kept coming in one after another. I knew that James hated me deeply and would surely seize the opportunity to smear and take revenge on me. So I handed the matter over to Norma. She had already become an executive and then slipped out for a vacation. A honeymoon. Yes, Mason and I had been married for several years. Both of us were over 30. Since we got the marriage certificate, we had accompanied each other as comrades and colleagues side by side and hadn't had a proper romance yet. This time we both took a vacation to hold our wedding in the Maldives. Under the veil I asked Mason again about the confusion that had been in my mind all along. Why on earth did you marry me back then? He was wearing an exquisite suit and gently lifted the veil to look at me. At that moment our tacit understanding told me, it was love at first sight, mutual understanding and the affectionate love of two trapped beasts sharing the same plight. Why bother to figure out some things so clearly? Just like how I miraculously reincarnated into what I am now, even Dr. Gao couldn't figure it out. Love is an attachment without reason, the most gorgeous gap in this rational world. Love makes us regain the courage to face countless malice. Only two people hugging tightly can walk boldly in this dark world. I saw countless colors flash in Mason's eyes. He might have had a lot of things he wanted to say to me, but with thousands of words gathering at his lips he only said, "Because I love you so much." I gave him the middle finger. "You brat." With a flash of silver light he put a diamond ring as big as a pigeon egg on my finger. "Mrs. Chi, happy newlyweds."